Welcome to Randolph and Martin Sports Talk on Sportanarium. It's Friday night, 5 o'clock. Hope you're all well. Before we go into the Premier League, we've got to talk a little bit about the rugby just for a second. Obviously, we're both Welsh. We'll talk about the game in depth in a bit, but Wales beating England, Mart. Got to start with that. What were your thoughts? Did you watch the game?
Yeah. I was weighing out whether to watch it. I'm always a bit like this before Wales England because it can go one way or the other. I think we said last week the form book just goes out the window.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, I've got nothing to do. I'll tune in. The sun's shining. St David's Day on Monday. Can't really have a better setup than that. And just just can't really get past all the England fans kicking off about the referee, and it's like their indiscipline cost them the game. And Wales, again for the third game in a row, played what was in front of us and got a job done. And I was absolutely so happy with the result, mate. How about you?
Yeah. I was just I just needed to do something on the Saturday just because it wasn't on until 4:45. I just needed to do something to take my mind off it. So I had a bit. You mentioned earlier when we were talking. You've been building cabinets and stuff, and that's basically what I did. I had a cabinet to build, so I spent all day Saturday just building the cabinets just to take my mind off the game. And obviously we'll talk about the game after we've talked about the Premier League. But yeah, it was just fantastic result. Played better than we did against Scotland and Ireland, and we won the game. Irrelevant of all the talking points, which again we'll talk about the tries and the why they were given and this, that, and the other after. But yeah, brilliant. Just wanted to know what if you'd seen the game, right? So if we talk about the Premier League first, obviously City again winning 21 games in a row, which is just incredible. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. Yes, it buys you good players, but there's plenty of good players in. You can even go down. West Ham, Everton. They're both top 4, top 5 now. Leicester, they've all got decent players, but City have bought a squad where they can just swap and change. I've noticed Foden hasn't played the last 2 games. Aguero now is. I think he had 20 minutes or 15 minutes in the last game. De Bruyne's back, so it's looking for me that they're getting the right players back at the right time. Got Champions League's coming up. They've won the Premier League. They'd have to, somebody need to blow up their pitch for them not to win. They're 15, 16 points clear. They haven't lost in 21 games, and they've got to lose 4 or 5 games in the next 12, and everybody else has got to win every game. So it's possible, but so is getting rid of the coronavirus tomorrow. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's a bit like Liverpool last year, really, when I can't remember how many points exactly they were ahead at lockdown, but there was the chat at the time of the resumption, like, oh, is anyone going to catch them this season? It's like, well, yeah, mathematically they can, but probably not because they're just too far ahead. And I mean, you have seen, the year that Gerrard slipped on his face and Demba Ba mugged them off. They had a bit of a lead and they sort of crapped the beds. There was the time Leicester surged. There have been cataclysmic failures to sort of win the league when you've had a decent lead, but I can't see this City team doing it. As you said, there's been questions about their recruitment. I think because of the money they've spent, especially on defenders, it's over. Is it touching 500 million? Yeah, I think it was 435 million they've spent in the last few years on defenders, which, like, a lot of the clubs I've followed won't see that kind of money in the whole existence. But eventually, when you've got a coach like Guardiola and you are bringing those big name players in, they are going to adapt to the style of play. And he is 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to say, get the players playing the way he wants. And if not, they're going to be out the door next transfer window. And you've had the resurgence of some people like John Stones is probably the best example of that. I think they've been struggling to replace company, really. Sort of like we've been struggling to replace Vieira since 2005. And I don't think when Diaz came in, or anyone really thought Stones would be the man that came in to partner him and sort of, they're probably the ones that have set the foundation for this run to happen. But Diaz, he's a bit younger than Stones, I think, but he's been the one to come in, put his arm around him and say, okay, we're going to get this sorted. We're going to sort of get a partnership. We're going to know how we're playing off each other. And I think their defense has gelled quite well. They're scoring goals from everywhere again. I think is Gundogan the top scorer now coming in from midfield. He said as well, they're not playing with Aguero. They're using De Bruyne as a false nine.
But it's funny, we were saying last week, with Ryan, the Man City fan, about they haven't got a striker, and they've got Jesus and this, that, and the other. But I think he scored two. A couple of nights ago, he scored one in the game before, so he's kind of proven us wrong, because I know Sterling hasn't scored, but yeah, going back to the defense, yes, they've spent obscene amount of money, but they've got obscene amount of money. So you look at United. United have spent probably £1 billion in the last 15, 20 years. And, if you're spending that kind of money, and so, Liverpool have spent an awful lot of money in the last few years on Van Dijk. And, if the players are worth it, you're going to buy them. But yeah, you mentioned Diaz, Stones, the Laporte, so they got three really good. They can be switching them three centre backs around all the time. And I remember you just said about 500 million. They spent 130 million on three fullbacks. I think it was the year before last. There's a Kyle Walker, Mendy, and I can't remember the third one, but it was
Cancelo.
No, he was after. Because at the time they bought. I think they bought Mendy for 50 million, and they bought another player in the same position for 30 million. And it's like, unbelievable. So one of them is going to be sitting on the bench. Obviously, Mendy's been in and out through injury in the last 2 years. He's class. He's a big unit. He's a good player. But same as pretty much Bailly for United. They look class on the pitch, but then they're injured for 3 months, and that's the problem. Stones, fantastic, but 2 years in and out of the team. I think he was expensive when he came as well for a youngster.
50 million, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, crazy money. England youngster. At the time, he was he was in and out of he was not in and out of the England team, but it was one of the names banded about as a future centre back, going to be there for years. And all of a sudden, he's joined City, and like most players that go to big spending clubs, you're not going to play every week, and then you're out of favour, and it's hard to get back in. And especially with City, you mentioned Gundogan there. Yeah, I think he was on the bench. They won 4-1. Obviously, it was only 2-1 with into the 90th minute, so they scored 2 goals in the last 90 seconds of injury time. To a bit of a false 4-1 really. But he was on the bench. Foden was on the bench. They're resting players for the Champions League. They got Mönchengladbach. I think it's week after next, or so a quick look. I know they've got. In fact, they might be resting them for United, because they're playing United in their next game on the 7th of March. But then I think it's the week. Yeah,
it's really bad. Since Arsenal haven't been in the Champions League, I'm a little bit of child and don't really follow the fixtures anymore until it gets to the quarters. So
yeah, well, it's the last 16. It's the last 16. So it's obviously they got United. They got United coming up in their next game, and then 3 days later Southampton, 3 days later Fulham, 3 days later Mönchengladbach, and then 4 days later Everton in the FA Cup. So 5 games in about 12, 13 days. So it's getting to the stage where, unless you've got 2 teams that can compete, there's no way you're ever going to win the quadruple. It's the FA Cup, the Champions League, and the Premier League, all in the space of 10 days with a couple of other games chucked in. So it's lucky that they're the only ones who could win that. There's no other teams that could do it, because you look at United, their closest rivals, United, 10, 12, 13 points behind them. They've lost Pogba, which is a massive blow. And apart from that, you've got your your Bruno Fernandes, who's been really good. You've got your 2 or 3 very good players, but nobody can replace them. So you've got your top 4 midfielders, and you've got, Cavani, Martial, Rashford in and out of up front and, on the wing. But you haven't got another 3 of them who can jump in. Whereas with City, they've just got, we get rid of him, we'll bring him in. And it's just, they've got 2 players per position. And that's the only way, it sounds daft, but if they do win it, they've bought it because they've just got so much money.
Exactly. Like, you can't have that squad depth of all those high level players without spending the cash nowadays. It's just, unless you've got some ridiculous youth setup, but you're not going to get that, are you? I think a lot of teams this season, especially, it might be to do with the congested fixture list, but Liverpool have struggled with squad depth, few injuries here, and I know they've had probably more than their fair share of injuries in the long run this season, but they've sort of missed a few defenders, and then it's sort of looking down like a bit like when City were playing Fernandinho as a centre back a year or 2 ago, was it, when they had the same problem? You moving players back into unorthodox positions for them, whether like Henderson. Probably at the minute touching a world-class central midfielder, stick him at centre half is a completely different game for the chap. You can't really expect him to do the same job at I know Leicester. That's probably the main reason we beat them on Sunday. Maddison was out. Vardy didn't look 100%. I think they've like Castagna or Fafana, one of those two. Is it? They're missing a few defenders as well. I know they lost Johnny Evans during the game and another player. So I think what you said about the quadruple is interesting because they've got Tottenham in the League Cup final, and then it's Everton. You said in the next round that'd be an interesting one to see if Everton rest anybody or if City do, and then Champions League. That's the one they always seem to struggle with, but this year more than any, you'd probably think if anyone's got sort of the depth of players and the ability to be able to do it, and having a manager like Pep always helps, sort of that general to rouse the troops to get over the line. They might do it, but it's as well. Where do you want to have your focus on? Which competition's plural? Do you want it to be the league or the Champions League? I think the owners and the fans and everyone would much rather they'd maybe win the Premier League and Champions League, League Cup, and the other one can go by the side. But I think that's what they want more than anything. So it's a case of whether they'd want to go for that quadruple as well. But trying to establish yourself as best team in the world,
they've definitely got to do it. When you look at it, it's a final is a final, so they're playing Tottenham in the final. So that's one game. They've only got, so they can put a good side out, and they should win that at the counter. So that's one straight away. Everton, they've they beat West Brom 1-0. So now they're 4th in the league. Yeah. So they're playing Man City in the quarterfinal. Then they've got to play a semi-final and a final. I think for them, they're going to be looking at. I think they've got Chelsea in a couple of weeks, which would be a big one because they're on their heels, and West Ham would, it's very, very close. The third, Leicester, Everton, and West Ham. I know that Liverpool is 7th or 8th, but they're a few points behind. And if they lose against Chelsea tonight, then there's a 4 or 5 point gap there. So I just think that Everton have got a good chance of getting top 4, top 5, Champions League next year, definitely being in Europe, whether it's the Europa, they'll want Champions League.
Yeah.
They're the best team in Merseyside at the moment. Liverpool, yes, they've had loads of injuries, but that just proves that they haven't got the strength in depth. But for City, we'll move on from City in a minute, but I just think that, the Premier League, they've already won it. They could put their second team out now against pretty much everybody and play a decent side against United, Leicester, and West. I think they've played West Ham recently anyway, so they won't have to play them again. But once they've played United this week, if they win that, they're going to be 16, 17 points clear. They're not going to be caught. So then it's literally, you've got a cup final, which is one game, and then you're down to 2 competitions. You've got the FA Cup where you've got 3 games, and you've got the Champions League where you're in your last 16. So they've already, I think they beat Mönchengladbach away. I think it was 2-0. So they're moving into, they're in the last 8. So they're only three or 4 games away, or 7 games away if you take the FA Cup as well, from being in 3 finals. And they've already won the league, pretty much. So they only need to concentrate on 7-8 games between now, which is, the first week in March. I know it goes on till June, so you've got March, April, May. So you've only got about 10 weeks to concentrate on 7 or 8 games if you break it down to the important games. The other games are irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Then, they'll beat Fulham with, it's like you take out Kyle Walker and you take out Mendy and you take out Diaz, but then you've got Stones and you've got Cancelo and you've got Laporte. You're just bringing in people who are just as good as each other. So it really doesn't make any difference. So if you look at it that way around, 7 to 10 important games in the next 10 to 12 weeks, the rest don't matter. Win or lose in the league, it doesn't matter. So I think it's on. I think it's the most possible, I think, that it's ever been, especially when you're bringing back De Bruyne's back this week. He played his first game. Aguero's back. How effective he'll be after being out for that long, but he'll only get better and better. So when it gets to semi-final, final stages, if he's firing, this could be the stars are aligning for them. It could be their year.
Yeah, definitely. They're coming back now as well, so they'll have a few games to build up that head of steam to have that final push in the last few games. The United fixture and the Chelsea, if they've only got sort of mid-table to sort of upper mid-teams left in the league, they could probably coast most of those games. Like you said, it'll just be But even if, like, against Chelsea and United, you can pick up a point, pick up 3 in all the other games, it's probably got to lose, like you said, 4 or 5 games to 16-point gap. So it'd be like 6 games for the gap to flip, because it's an 18-point swing, would it be?
It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
No, exactly.
I'm just looking at the fixtures. They got Everton last game of the season. They've got Chelsea in May, who are top 6. They've got Leicester in April, who are 3rd at the moment, and they've got United, who are 2nd. So they've got 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So even just right, okay, we'll beat the teams that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. The rest of them, even if we lose, we can't be caught, because that's going to put them another 3 points ahead of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So win those 3 games, the rest of the season is irrelevant. So it's 3 games, 3 games in 10 weeks or 12 weeks they need to win, and then they can concentrate on the other 7 or 8 games in the other tournament. I just think I don't know what the odds are, because I'm not a betting man. I don't even look at those. A few of my mates do it, but even if I'm not a betting man, that's something that could be worth putting a tenner on, because there's got to be some kind of decent odds to win them all. But when you break it down like that, I think they've got a good chance, a really good chance.
I'm just going to have a quick little look, actually, see if I can find anything. But that would have been I imagine that would have been quite long money at the start of the season, City to win the quadruple.
That's obviously come down, because they're a lot closer. But I would have thought Man City quadruple odds, and I think it'll be decent.
Premier League, FA Cup, EFL, Champions League.
I've got 14 to 1 on Betfair. And as I'm not a betting man, but a tenner on that, for a nice little 140 quid or whatever it would be. No, yeah, 140 quid.
That's not bad. I've only got 10 to 1 on Betway. Stingy buggers.
Yeah. But I think it'll be interesting. But then what we've just spoken about, that's if City win them. But you're looking at the teams below them at the moment. They'd have to win every game from now to the end of the season for any of that to pan out. So they're playing United. United is sleepwalking at the moment. It's unbelievable to me that they're in. I'm a United fan, but to me, they're in 2nd place. They they drew against West Brom. Second from bottom. I could say it was unlucky. Maguire hit the post with the last header of the game, but really, you're playing against a team a second from bottom. They're on about 20 points. They lost against Sheffield United, who were on 14 points. They're bottom of the league, and they drew against Palace this week. So, out of those three games, that should be 9 points, and they've come away with 2. So you've dropped 7 points there. I'm not saying they would have ever caught City in a million years, but they'd have been clear in second, and then they could have concentrated on, because they're still in the other cups as well, the FA Cup and the Europa, but they're sleepwalking at the moment. I don't know whether it is because Pogba is he's more influential than what you think. He doesn't score that many goals, but his engine, his backtracking, his passing he's very, very good. And when him and Fernandes were playing together, it's not a coincidence that United's fortunes have changed since Pogba's got injured. They've got some good players. Fred is a decent player, but there's nobody that can replace Pogba in the United side, and that's the big difference. With United and City, they've got some good players in reserve, but nothing like what City have got, and that shows the points difference to me.
I think for a title winning side as well, you always need those talismanic players to really shine through for you. I think the thing with this City team, it just seems to be full of them. I think De Bruyne is probably one of the standout ones. Sterling. You could probably rattle off a good chunk of the team sheet. Like you said, same for United. You got like Pogba, maybe Rashford. But I think all the other teams this season, they've struggled with the talismanic, like standout players having those consistent standout performances.
Yeah.
I mean, Aubameyang for us, it's his first season. I mean, he's getting a bit better now. He's finding his form again. I think he had a bereavement a few weeks ago, so that might have something to do with it. But at the start of the season, got his right. To me, as an Arsenal fan, it was all this hullabaloo over the summer. Is he going to sign? Is he not going to sign? He's the captain now, blah, blah, blah. He's our only source of goals. We kind of need him. He gets his contract. He gets his pay rise. And then it seems a bit like when Adebayor had moved somewhere and he'd get his feet under the table nice and cozy. And he sort of like on a Sunday, he's got his deck chair out, his feet are up on the coffee table, hands behind his head, like... Well, I'm here now, may as well just enjoy the view. But I don't, it's, say we're in Liverpool as well. Salah's been a bit hit and miss this year. Van Dijk's been out for most of the season, the whole season, is it now? I don't really know. Mane's been a bit hit and miss as well. I think you need those players, especially when you're wanting to chase a team down in a title race. You need those few players that are just a level above everyone else that can drag the team forward, sort of when a game's on a knife edge. You need a goal from somewhere. It might be in the Champions League or the Europa League. You're trying to stop from going out and force extra time. You need that sort of figurehead to drive you over the line. And I don't see a lot of Premier League teams, supposed big players, doing that at the minute. In a lot of cases, I feel like City are, though, and that's probably why they're barnstorming ahead. They do, as we've discussed, the resources they have at their disposal. That definitely helps. We'd be naive to think it doesn't, but when you have a squad laden with that much talent, it's hard to. But I think it's weird with United this year because you have sort of just laboured to second place, and I don't know if it's a case of Ole's doing the best he can with a bit like Arteta for me. Doing the best he can with a decent squad that he can do a job with, but you're never going to win a title with, and you've got a fair bit of deadwood you want to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether to praise Solskjaer or give him an earful, to be honest.
I don't think he hasn't bought very well. You could kind of mirror. Obviously you're an Arsenal fan. You can kind of mirror if you look at United and Arsenal and Everton and West Ham. Unbelievably United are second. I can't see how they're there. It's been such a ridiculous season that you're losing against teams that are at the bottom. You're not even you're not beating teams that are at the top. But you're still second in the league, which is incredible. But you put them and Everton together, Everton and West Ham together, they're mediocre sides. They're just below United and Leicester, but they've bought really well. They've bought some cracking signings in the last 2 years. They were offered 80 million quid for Richarlison from Barcelona at the beginning of last year. And it was a case of, 80 million quid for that guy. At the time, I would have thought 30, 35 million. And they declined it. They brought in, Rodriguez, the Colombian. They brought in some quality. Obviously, you've got Ancelotti as the manager. So when you've got a named manager like that, the name precedes the club. So they brought in some quality signings. West Ham brought in some quality signings, and they're sitting in 4th and 5th. United, as I said, unbelievably still in 2nd, but Arsenal down in 10th. They've bought, but you put together the players that Arsenal have bought against the players that West Ham have bought, and you put them side by side, and Arsenal, on paper, have bought better players. That party was meant to be, it's a Thomas party, meant to be the be all and end all. He's the next, he's the next Vieira, he's the next Freddie Ljungberg. It hasn't happened. And, you've got people like Piers Morgan on Twitter, famous Arsenal fan, raving about Partey. And I think when he came, I think he played really well for 2 games. He looked very good. And then, is it a case of he's come along, it's freezing cold in the winter, and he's thought, hold on a second, what am I doing here playing against Fulham on a Tuesday night in the icy cold conditions? So whether it gets to April now and the sun comes out and you see some of these players performing, but Rodriguez is Colombian, he's playing well up in Merseyside, and it's hard to put your finger on it, but is it down to Ancelotti, who's been a world-class manager? He's been at numerous world-class clubs. Is it the factor that he's a manager and he can bring out a lot more than somebody like Arteta, who's a brand new manager? He's been in the game for a couple of years. That what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that can be the case. I think a lot of Arsenal fans are probably expecting a bit too much from Arteta, considering it is his first full-time managerial job. He's only been a coach under Guardiola, hasn't he? But my sort of view of it still is, if you're going to get anyone in, you're going to want to get someone who's learned from the best. And maybe Arteta's best attributes are as a coach, and he's not quite cut to be a manager, but we're not going to find that out for a few years until we've given him a go. And like you said with the recruitment, I've been trying to work out for the past 10, 15 years since I started watching Arsenal, really, who is in charge of recruitment at this club? What ideas do they have when they bring some of these players to the team? Like, is someone blackmailing you to sign Park Ju-young and Marouane Chamakh and bloody David? How did David Luiz and Willian end up here? How have we become the Arsenal retirement home for former Chelsea Brazilians? Like, the recruitment at Arsenal, I'd say, is one of the fundamental aspects that's caused this decline. We have been selling our best players to rival clubs, sometimes for peanuts. I remember being really cheesed off when we sold Thierry Henry to Barcelona, because in the same transfer window, I think Darren Bent moved to Spurs from Sunderland, and he cost $500,000 more.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think Henry was in the last year of his contract, but it's like, okay, best striker in the world and someone who can just about break into the England team. Come on. Like that was just, but also it was the time where the value of English players was something that maybe tacked on 5-10 million to your transfer fee. In the glory days of the Premier League, shall we say. In terms of Ancelotti, I think that was a really, really, really good appointment for Everton. Getting a manager like that, they've been sort of a sleeping giant for a while, waiting to sort of push into the top 4, top 6, whatever it's called nowadays. Like, they had a bit of a go of it with David Moyes. They thought it was going to be the same with Martinez. It didn't quite happen the way they expected it to be. He's gone on to do really well with Belgium, of course, but bringing someone in like Ancelotti, you sort of have have the notoriety of him because he's won everything, as you said. He's managed in every league in the world. You got to imagine his little black book's a bit like a mobster's Hitler. The contacts he's going to have and the players he's going to be able to bring in.
Yeah, that's. I think that's. People mock David Moyes. He came to United. United was it was a club that was too big for him.
Yeah.
I think I was amazed that they didn't bring Mourinho in after Ferguson left. I've mentioned it on the show before that they were big mates. They'd have a bottle of wine after the game. And I thought that Mourinho would have come in, but they brought in Moyes and the club was too big for him. The changing room, the players, the name players were too big for him. Whereas at Everton, he was the manager, he was the kingpin, he was the main man. And on a shoestring, he brought them up 3 or 4 levels. He did very, very well. But his name's David Moyes. People abroad would have never heard of him. Whereas, as you just said, you hit the nail on the head there. Ancelotti, as you say, he's got contacts. He's got the black book. He could bring in, as he brought in, Rodriguez, from Real Madrid. United tried to get him, I think, 18 months before, and he didn't go for whatever reason. And there was a 45-50 million price tag on him. He was banging in a few goals here and there for Real Madrid. I think he'd only signed for them for a year, but something happened then, and they fell out, and he ended up being a bit of a Gareth Bale character. So
he was on loan for a year. Was it Bayern he went to?
Sorry
to interrupt you there.
Yeah, he went to Bayern for a year. So something obviously happened there, but Moyes wouldn't have been able to get into somebody like that. Whereas Ancelotti's brought in, a good few players, and they've gelled, and they're all playing well together. West Ham, same thing. Their players are gelling. They lost against City, but they drew against City in the first half of the season, and they're getting better and better. And they're in the, West Ham in the top 4, top 5. Everton, West Ham, and Leicester below Man United and City. So you've got, below them you've got Tottenham. They spent a load of money in the last 5 years. Nice, all singing, all dancing stadium. You've got the current champions of the world and the universe, Liverpool, down in 6th or 7th. With all their injury woes. You've got Arsenal down in 10th. You've got some big clubs below teams like West Ham and Everton. And, and they haven't spent this amount of money that a lot of these teams have spent. So it does show that City is a different animal. But apart from City, all the other teams, it just shows that if you spend well, then you don't need to spend a fortune. And it's testament to to those clubs that they've done that.
Yeah, West Ham, they've always it's interesting they've managed to do it by signing players because they've always had what is it they call it? Is it the Academy of Football they refer to themselves as, because they've always had the good youth team set up, like Lampard, Joe Cole. Did John Terry come through the ranks there? I don't know.
Rio Ferdinand,
yeah, of course. Countless names. I'm not going to pretend I'm going to try and name all of them, but it's like recruitment nowadays in football. I think it's so vital, especially when you spend when the market is becoming what it is at the minute. Teams like West Ham, Leicester, they probably can't afford to punt 40 million on 4 or 5 players a season. It's not feasible.
No.
It's barely feasible for Arsenal to do that at the minute, because even you just finished paying the stadium off and that. But yeah, it is smart recruitment, and I think those teams that are playing well and have recruited well, they're also playing sort of in a way where their sort of game has an identity. Like I remember one of my old housemates, Amy, she's a West Ham fan. Unfortunately, poor sod, because her dad's a West Ham fan, so she inherited that, unfortunately. She begrudgingly watches the Hammers, and I think she said it's the first time in years under Moyes this season where she's actually watched it, and it looks like playing football and not just going for the Dean Keats, Wrexham School of Football. Just hump it into the middle to the big lads up top, let them nut it home.
Yeah.
You've got players like Cresswell, who sort of broke onto the scene a few years ago. I think he came up through the ranks maybe, and then had a good year or 2 in the Premier League, and then there was a few change of managers. West Ham was struggling in the league, seemed to dip off a bit. He seemed to have a bit of resurgence, sort of playing in the back. I think he plays as a centre-half in the back 3 on the left side. Souček's probably, for me, one of the signings of the season.
Yeah.
I think they're calling him the Czech Vieira, and I kind of dig that, to be honest with you. I kind of like him. He's a bit of a nasty bastard as well, which I love in a footballer, I have to say. I'm a bit more of the old school mentality where if you got a bit of blood dripping from your eye, sod it, bloody wipe it on them to scare him, you know. So I think he's got his mate as well, Kufal, the fullback. He's got the Czech Mafia in East London. That's always fun. Same with Leicester, though. They've recruited some really good young players. Like, that James Justin came from Luton, or one of the low league clubs. There's that Castanha's come in. He was doing well at Atalanta because they had that Champions League run. That young lad Fofana, I believe he was at Monaco on the French teams. Might be wrong on that though. So, again, no, it's just really good recruitment, sourcing young players to fit in the system that you need them to. Did the same with Tielemans a couple of years ago. I remember on the first ever Football Manager game I had, where Yuri Tielemans was a 15-year-old, and you could sign him, and he would become the best midfielder in the world. So I don't know why no one had a punt on him before Leicester did, to be honest with you. But again, just smart recruitment, and they've not got sort of is it Saudi or Qatari royal family owning. They haven't got that level of wealth, but West Ham's Pawn brothers aren't exactly short of cash, and Leicester's lot got got a few quid spare to chuck away, so that definitely helps. But I think you look at teams like Newcastle, their recruitment policy is absolutely god awful. I don't know if Steve Bruce even gets a choice who he gets to sign, and
Yeah, with clubs like that, I just think that it's this. There's about 3 or 4 leagues in a league. You've got your top 6 or 7 now at the moment. Unless you're buying smart. I think it's West Ham, not West Ham, West Brom and Sheffield United. They're going to go down, so there's going to be clubs looking for the top 3 or 4, to come up, and they're going to have to buy straight away. You mentioned Arteta. It's a weird one because you bring in somebody who hasn't got the managerial experience. You could be the best coach in the world, but you're a coach. It doesn't make you a man manager. And if they're bringing in somebody like that, expecting, there must be some kind of like a 5-year plan, because there's no point bringing in a brand new manager, as in a manager who's never managed before, and then sacking him after 2 years because he's no good. Because you've got to really, you should earn your stripes. You shouldn't just come in. Did Lampard go somewhere for a year before he came to Chelsea?
yeah, he was at Derby County.
So he did a little. He's gained a little bit of wings, but really to be in a top club with that kind of money like Chelsea, obviously he's sacked now anyway, and Arteta, those kind of players who are good players, good coaches, you need to go back to the coalface and manage a team in Division 3. Like Gerrard, obviously, he's managing a Division 3 side in Rangers. They're nowhere near Premier League standard, and it's a totally different kettle of fish out there. But you need to go and do that first, and then come back and do a championship team for a couple of years, like Rooney's doing now with Derby, and then have a shot after about 5-6 years. You earn your stripes. It's just because you're a good player. And I've said this time and time again, you've got people like Brian Robson, Kevin Keegan, Dalglish. Dalglish did well because he was given all the money in the day with Blackburn. But put him on an even keel and put him in a Division 1 side or a championship side now, then they were awful. They did, you mentioned championship manager Kevin Keegan had Newcastle when they had more money than anybody else, and he just gone, all right, okay. And he bought Asprilla, he bought David Ginola. They had a cracking side from midfield up, so they'd score 3 or 4 goals, but concede 3 or 4 goals. That year when it was the year before they lost the title, I think Warren Barton was playing, and they had a cracking side. But if he'd spent a little bit of money on their defence, they would have won the league. They blew it one year, but the year before, I think they beat United 5-1. And I remember watching the game, and Philip Albert scored the last goal from defence. He came and he chipped Schmeichel. He run in just outside the area, chipped Schmeichel, brilliant goal. It was like a Cantona-esque goal.
Right.
And they should have won. They should have won titles, but because he wasn't a manager, he was obviously an attacking player. He took that into his managerial career, bought loads of midfielders and strikers, fantastic to watch, but leaked in defence. And if he'd had even if he'd brought in a defence coach and a couple of players, they would have done really well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're a good player or even a world-class player, Zinedine Zidane, sacked by Real Madrid, brought back by Real Madrid. It's, when you look at the best managers in the world, Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho, he's done really well over the years. Average football players.
Yeah.
None of them are good football players. They were, Ferguson for Rangers, okay player. I've read his autobiography. He was okay. Nearly sacked from Man United after that's a very poor run at the beginning. Comes from Aberdeen. They won the Cup Winners' Cup, and comes to United. Did okay. 1-0 for the first few years. On the edge of being sacked. Lucky break. Wins a couple of games. Goes on to become the best manager in the world. There's a little bit of luck involved, but I just think that these days, when Ancelotti, a decent player, but not world class. But look at these guys now as man, it's a skill. Man management's a skill. You can't just become a man manager because you've been a good footballer. You can bring your skills to the floor, but it doesn't make you a manager.
No, definitely not. Like you said, I don't see why they don't have to earn the stripes and go through the process of being maybe a youth team coach. I think, well, it's almost like a rite of passage nowadays when a footballer retires. They're always like, oh, how long is it going to be till he's back in charge? Gerard Lampard, probably every England player from that era is constantly linked with their club anytime there's a change of manager.
Ryan Giggs?
Yeah, Giggs straight with the Wales job. I think with all the stuff going on at the minute, they should just let Rob Page have a crack at it for the Euros, to be honest. Put him on like gardening leave or something. But I don't see why he should be able to cut his teeth in a fairly high-profile job just so it's good on his CV when United part company with Ole and he wants to throw his hat. Because that's what he's doing, let's be honest. He's trying to posture himself for the United job when that comes available. But you look at Mertesacker at Arsenal's a good example. Didn't sign on as like a first team coach or anything. Like he's working in the youth academy and that's set up. I think he's coaching and managing the youth team for the under 15s.
Yeah.
And then gradually he's probably going to work his way up. I think Ljungberg did that. He was coaching with our youth academy. He stepped in for an interim role between Emery and Arteta, didn't he? But he's, I think he was back in the setup for a while. I think he might have gone again now. But he was sort of working his way through the ranks. And because as well, like, it's all the coaching qualifications you have to do and everything. So I don't know if a lot of them do. They could probably get fast track that if they're a professional footballer and they're not going to have to worry about paying for them, are they?
I know in the last couple of years of their playing careers, I'm not sure about some of the other ones, but Giggs definitely did one of the FA badges. Oh, yeah. A couple of them, I know there was, I can't remember who it was, but one of the coaches, he became a manager. For example, Lampard. I don't think it was him, but you become the manager, but that you've got to have your UEFA badge within a certain time. So this manager, as an example, Lampard gets the job, doesn't have the UEFA badge, so has to do the UEFA badge while he's got while he's been given the job anyway. It'd be like you go into work, as a lawyer. In the O.J. Simpson case, but you haven't passed your bar and you're doing it while it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And before you came on the show, we were talking about the merry-go-round of managers. I don't know another professional where you like Arteta. If he gets sacked, 3 months later he's going to get a job with somebody else as a football manager. 3 years later he might get sacked there, and it just goes on. And these managers will get sacked 5 times in this 10, 15-year period. but they keep getting jobs, earning millions of pounds a year. So, you know, if you were working in as a manager of Asda and you got sacked, and then you went to Sainsbury's with your CV saying that you were sacked from Asda, you wouldn't get a job.
No,
It's
definitely not.
and you're not getting paid millions of pounds for it. It's just a crazy situation, and it's laughable, really. And they're in charge. You know, Sam Allardyce is a perfect example. You know, he's been sacked by numerous clubs. He lasted a couple of weeks, if that, for England, because he got caught, you know, on camera. And now he's back at West Brom, earning whatever he's earning, probably a couple of million quid for, you know, taking him down to the Championship. And it's bizarre, and it doesn't happen in any other walk of life that I can think of. It's just crazy. So we've been discussing football. So we'll come off football now. We'll come on to boxing and UFC. Just one thing. I haven't met you before. So you're this is the face of Fighting Talk, then, yeah?
Yes, yeah, I'm the man behind the Fighting Talk 2 page. That's me.
Okay, great. And you English?
I am, yeah. London, West London, born and raised.
Okay, so should we talk about rugby first, since you're talking to two Welshmen?
You know what? The only sport I watch is MMA, so I've got absolutely nothing to offer on any sort of aspect, if I'm all honest with you.
No, you got two Welshmen here who beat England on last weekend at the rugby. So
I'm with you.
As you know, obviously Wales is it's the religion in Wales is rugby before church. You know, so that's the thing. I'm glad as well. I had a shave before coming on, because we'd look very similar, because I got a ginger beard as well normally. So I'm glad I got rid of it. But right, yeah. So Fighting Talk. So tell us a bit about yourself then. What's the story behind Fighting Talk?
I used to train. I used to do boxing and stuff when I was a bit younger, just to shed a bit of weight down. And then I got into. I started training at a gym called London Shoot Fighters, which quite a lot of UFC fighters and stuff have come out of anyway, and Bellator fighters, and just there's some great fighters there anyway. So I was training there for a little bit. Really got into MMA. I was doing a little bit of Muay Thai and wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and predominantly boxing. And I was just, using it to exert some energy. And then, a couple of years later, I was like, look, I love speaking about MMA and stuff like that. So I was like, why don't I set up a channel where I can speak to a couple of friends of mine that are into MMA? And then it just kind of went from there. We've been doing it for about 2 months now. So still pretty early on in the whole podcasting world, but yeah, we just talked like we were a couple of friends in a bar just talking, and just hit record at the same time, And that's pretty much it. It's pretty much where we're at. So we just make pre and post fight content, and just different topical conversations on UFC and just MMA in general. Really, we all love the sport, so we all just like talking about it as well.
How do you think it's so obviously, yeah, it's still pretty new, UFC. My brother, he was a martial artist down in Wales. Well, not was, he still does it, but he's the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA and stuff. And so I followed it a little bit, nothing like you guys have. I follow boxing, a lot more. But it seems to be it's pretty new. What are your, a couple of things. First of all, what are your thoughts on the YouTubers coming in and raising the profile to like a different level on, I presume, a lot of spectators that wouldn't have come across and watched it originally?
Boxing's been going on since the dawn of time, really, and people have been talking about boxing since the dawn of time. And as soon as boxing's a spectator sport, so people were talking about it, and then people wanted to listen to other people talking about it. So I think it's just a natural progression of the sport, and MMA, and particularly the UFC in general, which is kind of the main promotion of it. It's the headline promotion, as we all know. And I think people just like talking about the sport that they're into, and there's not, as you said, it's very new as well. So there's not loads and loads of people in that space. But I think over the last kind of, for me anyway, the last kind of 4 to 5 years, there's been so many more people getting into that space with the accessibility of getting onto Spotify and various different kind of platforms that you can produce content and have that content go out to such a big audience as well.
Yeah.
You know, and there's, at the end of the day, there's two things to be made from it. If you are that way inclined, you can have fame and you can have money potentially from doing these things. And for most people, myself included, that is a driving force for wanting to do these things, as well as the love for the sport. So it's the love for the sport as well as that kind of thing in the back of your mind, like I could potentially make money out of doing this if I'm good enough. So I think, you know, there's a lot of different aspects to consider when doing it, but also, you know, everyone in it is learning as well. We're all learning together about how to produce better content, how to, you know, get in touch with fighters to do interviews and stuff. So yeah, I think over the next coming years, and as we've seen over the past couple of years, it will just continue to grow and grow and grow. And so many boxing fans are coming over to watching MMA as well, because it's just, in my opinion, you know, it's just me, I'm an MMA fan. It's a little bit more exciting.
Obviously, you've got the, you know, as I say, I don't know much about MMA, but you mentioned MMA, you mentioned UFC, and the first name that comes to mind is Conor McGregor.
Yes.
He's obviously coming to the end of his time. Who are the future stars? Not so much, I suppose, personalities who are going to drag it on to keep it at the same level as it is now, or to push it forward. Not so much a world-class fighter, but what he's like a one-off. You know, like you got Money Mayweather with the boxing. He's taken the promotion to the next level. There's a few, you know, Tyson Fury, absolute screwball, Billy Joe Saunders. You know, they're hilarious. They're great. They're great for boxing. Who is great for UFC?
I think there's so many people. Conor kind of imprinted that blueprint and kind of laid down the foundations for all of these fighters to be able to not replicate it, but kind of emulate what he was doing to a certain degree with regards to creating personas. Whenever I interview a fighter, I usually say, do you feel you have to have a persona to be seen and to be heard by the MMA community? And most of them just say, you know what, I just try and be myself. But does that always get you to the next step? You know, so I think that every fighter has the capabilities of putting on a show and, you know, not only being very good in the cage, but also being very good outside of the cage with regards to their business mind as well, the business mindset, and their investments into certain things, especially certain things like whiskey, for instance. Conor's obviously got his Proper 12 whiskey that now sponsors the UFC. So he's fighting in a cage that's actually sponsored by him, and he's getting paid kind of double for doing this. That's just fantastic. And so many fighters can learn from that and, you know, really see what he's doing and what he's done, and definitely replicate and emulate it. But with regards to your question as to who's the next big thing, it really depends on who the UFC want to put forward to be the next big thing. There's so many big stars and so many big characters, and it really just depends who Dana White likes and who the promotion likes and who's good for the organization. Obviously, at the moment, there's a guy called Israel Adesanya who's fighting at the weekend, a very, very big name. He's got a lot of character. He's also got a lot of haters as well, people that dislike what he does. So naturally, that brings more eyes to the sport because people want to see him lose. People want to see him get beaten up, right? So, and Colby Covington is another example. He was doing his whole, like, he loves Trump thing all the time. And, you know, he is playing a persona and he's playing a character to not only get fans that genuinely like what he does, but also have people that dislike what he does. I did a show a couple of weeks ago with a good friend of mine who's very much into wrestling, WWE. And the UFC has almost got a selection of people that can replicate what the WWE are doing with regards to having a villain and a bad guy, and having this person that's the superstar, the angel, the person that comes in, you know, ripped, got a full six pack and perfect hair and stuff like that, and they're a great fighter. But then they've also got someone like John Jones, for instance. Naturally, he does stuff outside of the cage, which is not very good. He's been in a lot of altercations with the police with regards to his driving, his having firearms and drugs, etc. But he is a bad guy, you know. Whereas he always had this rivalry with Daniel Cormier, who's very much a good guy. So they've and this was years ago that they actually started that kind of rivalry between them. But it was, you almost think it's a bit set up. And I think quite a lot of the things that the UFC do put on are a little bit false with regards to how they match these people up that will potentially dislike each other and cause a bit of hate and drama and stuff like that. So there's anyone is the answer to the question, really. Anyone can be a star if they want to be a star, and they have that ring prowess as well as having a good character, and the UFC backing them as well.
That Israel character, where is he fighting this weekend?
Israel Adesanya. He's on UFC 259 this weekend, against Jan Blachowicz.
So is that in America?
Be in Vegas. No, is it in Vegas? No.
Fight Island. No, are they
sure?
done with Fight Island? I thought, are they done with Fight Island at the minute? It'll be Vegas, won't it?
Yeah, I think
it'll be the Apex.
Vegas, yeah.
It's the Apex, won't it?
I think it's at the Apex. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have made a note of this.
The only reason why I ask is because obviously with these COVID restrictions and everything, he was at the FAR Joseph Parker fight in New Zealand on the weekend.
Oh yeah.
Because he was he's been in he's in FAR's corner, and he's been training with FAR. So if he's been in New Zealand, literally, I was watching the fight on DAZN on Saturday afternoon, and he was there in the ring. So he's gone from New Zealand to, I suppose, Vegas. They don't really care, do they? They've got a mayor that wanted everybody to come to test out whether people are going to die or not. So I don't think it's going to make much difference, does it?
No, I mean, Izzy is actually from New Zealand, so it'd be probably quite appropriate. He'd be there as well. I know he was at an All Blacks game as well recently, and then flying over to Vegas. I think they usually pay for their flights and stuff about 7 days before. Quite a lot of the fighters go over kind of 7 to 10 to 14 days just so they can acclimatize depending on where they're from.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's in Vegas.
All right. Okay. What as far as like fan participation is concerned, obviously I used to say the boxing, the pay-per-view is massive. What kind of figures do they have in UFC? And obviously with boxing, it varies massively with fight to fight. But what are the next few big fights coming up on pay-per-view?
Have you got any notes on this, mine? I know there's Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, which is obviously the week after. That's quite a big fight for the fans as well. Maybe not a pay-per-view, but that's a very big fight. And then UFC 260. Do you know who's headlining the card?
The 260. I will just find out for you now. Sorry about this, gentlemen.
Is it the same
regional
kind of...
Regional MMA is starting up again fairly soon. Cage Warriors. They're doing another trilogy. It's the 18th to the 20th of March. They're always really good.
There's quite a few Welsh guys on there as well. I was speaking to Ben Ellis, who I did an interview with and stuff. He's actually going to be on there chasing his...
he's fighting one of the SBG Manchester guys, I think, and that one. That'll be really... He's getting the Welsh Khabib mantra at the minute because of his grappling and ground pound. Kevin Holland's fighting at the end of March. He's got Derek Brunson. That'll be... give him like a top 5 number by his name, surely, if he gets past Brunson. 260, that's Stipe and Ngannou. They've got earmarked for that one at the minute. So that's Steve. That'll be the heavyweight champion, also a firefighter full time. Taking on probably the scariest puncher in the heavyweight division, probably a man who I don't think, was it maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we started training MMA, and maybe till he was like 25, 26, he was working in the sand mines in Cameroon, just brute strength, power, scary individual.
What's his name?
Francis Ngannou.
Oh, yeah. I've seen him having some tips off Mike Tyson a few months back.
I think he wanted to box, actually, originally, but his coach, I think his coach pushed him into MMA. But I think he has expressed interest in wanting to go into boxing, but he's, I don't know if he's necessarily as polished as he quite could be in terms of his striking, but because you look at his really quick knockout of I think it was Connor, was it Rosenstruck he fought last time out? Got that like
Yeah,
20-second finish.
Yeah, I think it was just over 20 seconds, but it was just big looping shots.
Yeah,
He wouldn't be able to pull that off in the ring,
No.
you know. And I don't think I think the way that he's built as well, he's very good for 3 or 5-minute fights. Not that he usually goes the distance anyway, but I think to have those shorter rounds with higher intensities, I think he'd have to have a very, very big camp and a very big change in his direction with regards to his training to get in the ring and do 312s. I think he'd be well out of his depth. And he'd take up half the ring as well.
He's a big guy, big shoulders on him.
Yeah, very big guy, very big guy.
But no, out of the 3 title fights this week, Connor, which one are you most looking forward to? We've got Adesanya going for the light heavyweight belt, so could be, is it the 5th 2-weight champion or the 6th now? There's been a few. The female go. I know you're a big Nunes fan, aren't you? Cannot dispute that lady is the greatest female. You could even make, like you said on your GOAT show, you could even make the argument for being the greatest of all time. And probably in the 2000s, I'd make a solid case for being the GOAT of the 21st century.
Yeah,
I think that's the featherweight belt contestant. That's the one she's got at the moment.
Yeah, she's currently holding the 145 and the 135. Not that there's a lot of competition in the 145, but she holds both belts anyway, just because she can.
Oh, of course, she is Valentina the only real competition in that division, or is she a title holder still?
In 125, she holds the title in 125, and then you've got Weili Zhang down at 115, I believe.
I only thought there was 3 female divisions. This is how about
there's 150.
Yeah, of course, bantamweight.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's 115, 125, 135, and 145. So there should be 4.
Do we have an atomweight division in the UFC? Yeah, I can't.
No atomweight. No. Atomweight is 105, isn't it?
105, that's it. Yeah, because they have that in Invicta, not. Yeah, that's right.
What are your thoughts on Clarissa Shields fighting? She's fighting tomorrow night.
Oh, of course she is. Yeah, she.
What weight is she at? 165, 175.
I don't know what it's super welterweight. So I don't know what that would be. What that would equate to in MMA. But it's crazy. It's just it's her first fight, isn't it? I know I've seen some of her training because she was interviewed a few days ago by Susie, one of the other Sportinarian presenters. But there's 4 belts involved. So she's fighting for a world title and she's only had about 2-3 months training, which is incredible. Again, I don't know that Marie Declare, I don't know who she is, but it's on DAZN US and UK, and it's on tomorrow night in Michigan. But it's for a massive women's world champion in boxing to go across. I know it's totally different. She could get kicked out of the ring within a minute if she's not acclimatized to those kind of blows. But it's a bit crazy for me to change, because it's like being a rugby player and then moving to Australia and have 4 days training and then go and play on Aussie rules. You would just be, lumps kicked out of you. It's beyond, really.
I mean, I think it's Jackson Wink MMA. She's been training out with is it Holly Holm, John Jones, characters there. So that's the one in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So if she's looking to level up her kickboxing a bit, Holly Holm, perfect, but world champion kickboxer. I think she had a few boxing fights as well, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's a few other women that train out. Is it Michelle Waterson, the other one? Because I think they all do TikTok videos or something together. So if you want to learn off any sort of collective of people and you're not going to go to Brazil to train with Amanda Nunes and Daniel Valverde, you're going to go Jackson Wink and is it Mike Jackson and Mike Winklejohn and Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, probably two of the greatest coaches in MMA. You've got those gyms that are just prestigious in name, and you've had the stable of fighters to go with it. It's the same in boxing, and they're one of them. So if she's going to go anywhere to get the training, she's definitely going to the right place. And I think there is probably maybe more in women's MMA, because it's a shame. What irritates me most about women's MMA is how long it took a lot of the fans and a lot of the critics in the media to accept it as a sport like they did with women's boxing. It's just like, look, these women same as the men. They're athletes in the prime of their career. They're going into the cage to fight for our entertainment. Just give them the bloody respect they deserve. And it's finally getting to a level where it is like that. And I'm not really sure about how I feel about these Russian weird MMA fights where they'll have a 500-pound man against a tiny little fly. But I don't know if you saw that, Connor, a few months ago.
Yeah. I wish I hadn't, but I did see it. It's very similar to that
She
Fight
chinned
Circus
him.
thing. If you ever saw Fight Circus, it was just it's just a whole fight card of mismatches and kind of, it's just jokes really. And it kind of, as something becomes very popular, as MMA has done over the past couple of years, people want to replicate it and want to try and make a joke of it as well. Naturally, it happens in all sports. When you've got Mike Tyson coming back when he's like 55 to fight, whoever. He could fight a bin man. It doesn't matter. People want to see him fight. So, and you're always going to get these things, and it's unfortunate, but it's just part of the parcel. It's just part of the game at the end of the day.
I feel it's been signed that he's fighting Holyfield next, Tyson Holyfield.
Oh, I've heard about that.
For me, it's a bit of it's a joke. Just going back to the women's thing, I think you mentioned about you're a bit annoyed with it taking so long for the women's to be credible compared to the men's. I think they're lucky, because if they'd been around 20 years ago, it's probably taken 10 times quicker for it to be credible in MMA than it did in boxing. When Jane Couch was around in maybe late 80s, early 90s, she was the first female British boxer of any note whatsoever. There was no women in any gyms in boxing, it was frowned upon. They need to stop it because if they get punched in the chest, you can get like breast cancer and loads of ways of trying to stop the fights from happening. And I think maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, you had Muhammad Ali's daughter, Layla Ali. She came in America, and she was kind of like the equivalent. And it started to, sway slightly on the positive side. But I reckon it took 15 to 20 years to get to a level below where it is now, where you go into most gyms, and I'm looking at the card now for next week. You've got the next 3 or 4 cards. You've got big male fights, and you've got 3 or 4 other good male fights, but in between you've got a female fight, and they would have been either on the bottom of the card, or they wouldn't have even been on the card even 2 to 3 years ago. So it's come on very, very quickly compared to MMA, which has come on so much faster. It's only been the last few years. Apart from that, it was a tortoise race for the women against the men.
I think the UFC is very good at that as well, and especially over the past kind of year to 18 months, even with the Ronda Rousey era, she was kind of thrust into this position to be at the forefront of creating this, pathway for women's MMA, for instance, especially the UFC. And over the past a year, like I say, there's been so many more women fighting, and the UFC, Dana White, etc., are promoting women fighting by having so many female fights on the cards. It's unfortunate that the women divisions are very, very shallow with regards to the high level talent pools that they have, but they're getting matched up, and the fans are getting more excited about seeing these high level fighters, Rose Namajunas, the Weili Zhangs, the Valentina Shevchenkos. At the weekend, obviously, we have Amanda Nunes, who is the GOAT. There's no male or female. I don't look at it in male and female, race, gender, whatever you want to talk about. She is the GOAT. She's the only person to have 2 belts consecutively and defend both belts. And she still has both. She's the only person to ever do that, whether she be male, female, or whatever. She's definitely in contention for that greatest of all time, banner above her name kind of thing. But people like Alexa Grasso as well had a fantastic fight a couple of weeks ago, and Dana White said she was the Mexican Ronda Rousey, which, I was very, very annoyed at, because she is Alexa Grasso. She's not the Mexican Ronda Rousey. She is, going to be the next MMA superstar instead of it being female superstar. I think the UFC are getting very good, and have been very good with regards to their promotions of female fighters, and especially having them on the main event. Every couple of weeks we'll have a female main event or a co-main, or we'll have, there may be a 10 fight card and we might have 3-4 female fights, which is fantastic. It's always going to be a male-dominated sport, but I think it depends on the mindset of the people running these organizations. You know, boxing is still quite an old school political kind of run mentality, isn't it? Whereas MMA is very forward thinking, from what I can gather anyway.
I think it's interesting with the there's a social media is playing a big part as well, because they self promote. I know a lot of the female boxers. Again, I'm not familiar with the MMA, but I know the boxers. They're engineering their way to title fights after 4, 5, 6 fights because of their Instagram. Not so much the Facebook or Twitter accounts, but their Instagram accounts. I'm not going to name names, but there's 2 or 3 who've engineered their way. They've only had 4 fights, 5 fights, and they're fighting against world champions who've had 15, 20 fights. Within 18 months of they're bringing. You can say what you want about it, but they're using their looks, they're using their social media accounts to do that. It's fair enough. It happens with male fighters as well. There's a lot of mismatches, and you could even take it as far as Lomachenko. Engineered himself a world title fight after, I think he lost his 3rd fight, avenged it in his 4th or 5th, and then he became like a 4-5 weight champion. So it's the same kind of thing. But it's interesting that 5 years ago that wasn't even a thing. Now you'd have had to get sponsors. Now they're getting sponsors through their Instagram accounts. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, and whether it's a dangerous thing having somebody who's only had 3, 4 fights. You may look good punching a bag in a gym, and editing it and looking good for that 30-second clip that you're just going to put on. But when you're coming up against, I know that Rachel Ball and Shannon Courtney are having their 2nd fight soon. But the woman that was due to fight Ball, she had a shoulder problem, and an Australian woman. She only had, I think, 4 or 5 fights. And it's I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Martin, what do you think?
Oh, well, no, you should. I'm quite old school in it. You should have to earn your way to a title, and that means probably beating the majority of contenders in your division. That's why in boxing. There's a lot of mandatory matchups, and you look at Canelo Yildirim from this weekend. I think that was a mandatory matchup, and like, really, how is that? But you look at the same thing, like when Anthony Joshua beat, I think, Charles Martin for his first heavyweight title. How was Charles Martin a heavyweight champion of the world in any capacity? Like, he's a much better fighter than me, don't get me wrong. I'll snap like a twig, but come on, man. Like, I think when you have that star power, though, again, another thing that's irritated me about women's MMA, not being detrimental to the ladies at all, when Ronda made a comeback and Amanda was the champion. I'm sure you remember this, Connor. Might have annoyed you too, actually. All the promos, Ronda's back. Here she comes. She's been out for a while. Holly Holm kicked her into the Shadow Realm, and then Amanda Nunes kicked Holly Holm into the Shadow Realm. So, Ronda's back. She's coming to take a belt. No one else in women's MMA has ever existed. So, yeah, here we go. I don't think they even mentioned how Amanda Nunes was, I think she was like 17-4 or 17-3 at that point. She only lost once in the UFC. Yeah. It was quite early on as well when she just signed over. As I said before, like BJJ black belt under Daniel Valverde, Ronda's whole game, get inside, clinch up, judo toss, armbar, judo gold medalist. What are you going to do? Anything else? That's your game. And like, her game plan just did not work. And Amanda read her like a book. And it was knockout with punches, wasn't it? It wasn't a kick. But I remember watching
one of my favorite fights. Yeah, one of my favorite fights of all time.
It was first year uni, and I remember going to, because I was student flats, there was literally a pub next door. It was wonderful. You could see the beer garden out our kitchen window. Fantastic. So I thought, oh, you remember Ronda Rousey through, oh yeah, there's her dude going to WWE. Oh, she's fighting. So, oh, let's go watch her kick someone's ass. I was like, you sure about that? Do you know who Amanda Nunes is? Oh, don't watch UFC, do I, mate? I know who Conor is. Yeah, Ronda will beat her though. Okay, it was good marketing to get the casuals in and sort of but they almost set like the poster child of women's MMA up for a really, really bad failure. And I feel a bit bad for her in that sense, but she probably had a lot of people in it. She was doing films at the time and that. She probably had a lot of yes men in her ear, like, well, Rhonda, you've got this money, but look at all this big, fat, nice pile of money.
But she was in Fast and Furious at the time, wasn't she, as well? You know, so this big profile. But you know, again, you've come from a judo background. You know, what would be your ideal background then? Do you think, whether it's men or women, who are more successful? Is it boxers that turn into martial artists, or would it be martial artists that have to learn how to box?
This is the age-old question.
And I'm good with this one if you'll make it go in, right?
Go for it.
About 7 or 8 years ago, there was this new breed of fighters who were classified as mixed martial artists. They did not, considering Rory McDonald was one of the first kind of mixed martial artists who didn't come from a specific background. He came from a mixed martial arts background. Cyril Gane, who fought at the weekend. John Hathaway, who was in the UFC up until about 7 years ago. He retired due to illness. He was a mixed martial artist. He didn't come from any background. He didn't come from a striking background or a wrestling background or anything. He came into this sport through doing mixed martial arts on a daily basis, whether that be a striking or shoot box session, straight into a wrestling session, straight into a Muay Thai session, straight into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu session. It was just called a mixed martial arts session. That was it. So I think for the level of fighter that we have nowadays, you need to be a straight mixed martial artist. You cannot come from a certain background, because you'll get found out when you get to an elite level opponent, as we saw with Ben Askren. Ben Askren came over to the UFC from one championship in a terrible swap for considerably one of the other greatest of all times, Demetrius Johnson. And he was he was an all-out wrestler, and he got put against people that were Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists. He got choked out. He got put against a brawler, a backyard brawler. He got knocked out. So it's like, nowadays you have to have a complete skill set. You cannot just come into this with one specific background, because you'll get found out. Peter Yan, who's fighting at the weekend, is a Russian guy, predominantly a striking background. He went to Tiger Muay Thai for 18 months or a year, trains out in Tiger Muay Thai to patchwork his striking abilities. And then he went to Brazil for a section of his early career to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he's currently doing his camp at American Top Team, which is a very much a wrestling background kind of camp that he's in at the moment. So I think you really need to be a thoroughbred hybrid of a mixed martial artist, instead of necessarily coming from a specific background. I think you'll do so much better if you can come from that specific background. If you can come from a good mixed martial arts background.
I think very much of the day of a wrestler coming in with a bit of an overhand and sort of sweeping through the divisions. You do still see it done occasionally. Like, you will have guys. There was a name of that. It's not Rolando Vieira, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy that managed to get tapped out by a 3-time or 4-time world champion Jiu-Jitsu champion at black belt level. Gets choked out by a blue belt it's mixed martial arts, isn't it? Like,
no hands at all.
Exactly. But that's the thing. Jiu-Jitsu, in the sense of Jiu-Jitsu in a cage in an MMA fight, is completely different. A lot of things that will work in a gi really won't work in a cage. Like, that's why things like rubber guard have had to develop. And Eddie Bravo's doing combat jiu-jitsu at the minute, because I've heard him speak quite a lot about it. But the main reason he started that, there's come to a bit of a pass, as they know a few things, like a few elements of jiu-jitsu that will be very successful in MMA, a few things that won't be, just by the nature of the sport with the strikes. So combat jiu-jitsu, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's the one with the palm strikes and that, and slapping.
Yeah.
So you're not leathering 10 tons of shit out of each other, but you just, if you're trying to cinch up a triangle and someone's slapping you in the face, it's going to make you think twice about the little adjustments you're making, and it's just something else to deal with. And I think like you said with Ben Askren, very much. I think you guys describe it on your podcast as the wrestlefuck style. You know, he's very heavy with his pressure, not exactly a power puncher, ground and power, but he just lays into you with volume, not power but volume, and he's got the job done. I think he's beaten like Douglas Lima, people like that.
Yeah, Robbie
so he's
Lawler,
got a decent resume.
Retiring Robbie Lawler, you know.
I was gonna say, well, bulldog choke Robbie Lawler after getting dumped on his head. I thought he was out after that.
Annihilated for the first minute as well. Annihilated.
He had that weird wrestling match with Jordan Burroughs a couple of years after he'd won the Olympic gold. Like, I think he wrestling at middleweight or heavyweight, and Askren's a little welterweight. So, but he's doing that not charity boxing thing. He's doing the one of the celebrity boxing things you mentioned, Steve, with
Jake Paul.
the Paul sisters.
Jake Paul's fighting him, isn't he?
Yeah.
So how do you think that'll go? Obviously, I've seen that Jake Paul. He's a bit of a puncher. Obviously he's fighting. He's fought a basketball player. I don't know who he fought before that. I know that his brother Logan Paul lost against that British guy KSI.
Yeah.
He actually looked okay at boxing. He was a much better boxer than that KSI. KSI was just windmill. He won it. To be fair, he did win, but both of them were very, very poor. And his brother looks like he can bang, but how do you think he's going to get on against this Askren guy?
It's more of I think it's more of a MMA versus the YouTube generation fight where they couldn't have picked the worse opponent than Ben Askren, because like if you're going to pick a guy in MMA with no hands, I love Damian Maia, I love Jiu-Jitsu. Not the best striker. Same with Askren. He's very much known for his wrestling style. He was on the Olympic team either once or twice as a wrestler, I think, as well. Or is that, I might be getting him confused, can't remember. Really high-level college wrestler, though. You're picking the complete wrong guy who was never in MMA for his striking. He was never a world champion for his striking prowess. So if he's going to beat anyone, it's probably going to be Ben Askren. But also, if anyone's going to take the banter on the chin and make fun of himself and not take it too seriously, he's what's his style of wrestling? He calls it. It's like funk wrestling. He sort of throws himself about. He has a bit of a laugh. He's got a bit of a dad bod. He doesn't take himself too seriously. I've always been a bit of a fan of Ben Askren because of that. He's a bit of a bit like my generation, like that self-deprecating humor that sort of perks you up a bit. But I really I want to say the professional fighter is going to beat the YouTuber, but Mr. Paul, I think it's Jake Paul, isn't it? He's been boxing fairly religiously for maybe 2 years, 3 years at the point they fight. Ben's been prattling around doing exhibition catch wrestling matches, making podcasts, commentating for Flow Grappling. I don't really know if he's been dedicating the time in the gym, putting the hours in, which is where you get the rewards from at the end of the day. Yeah, he's a professional fighter, but a boxing match that negates his wrestling completely.
It's not boxing though, isn't it? Isn't it MMA?
No, they're having a boxing match.
What is boxing? All right, okay. Well, yeah. So then,
I think one of the Pauls, I think it might be Logan actually, was a pretty decent wrestler in high school or college, but nowhere near like the Askren level of sort of pressure chain wrestling. So that wouldn't really be a factor. Yeah, I think they're rearranging that because they did. I quite like the pay-per-view structure they'd worked out for that. Because I think the earlier you bought it, it was like a festival ticket. So there were like bands. So if you bought it in the earliest band, you got it for maybe, I don't know, 25 quid. And then it'd go up to 35, 45. And then like Mayweather's pay-per-views are like 90 quid, aren't they? So like 90 quid on the day. So I thought that was an interesting pay-per-view structure they used. But I think it got cancelled because there was a lack of interest, which doesn't surprise me because we all saw Floyd. Well, I don't know if you guys saw Floyd fight that tiny little Japanese kickboxing fella, but that was just like cruel to watch.
He's a rising fighter.
That was just horrible to watch. Like
he'd never lost. He was an unbeaten fighter, but I think he's embarrassing himself now. The Conor McGregor fight for me was a fix. I just think it was all about the money. I was actually I was in Croatia at the time, and it was free out there to watch. And it was the last night before coming back, so I stayed up, and then I had to travel back, so I was absolutely knackered. But for me, it was like watching a big dog playing with a puppy, and he just played with him for 11, 12, for 7, 8 rounds until he was absolutely knackered. Something's come up on my screen. There we go. And then you could have taken him out in any round, but I think it was a case of, there must have been something in the contract to say, look, you can't embarrass him. He's got all these followers in the UFC. So you bring in boxing fans to UFC. You bring in UFC. Must have been lots of clauses in that contract that they both had to meet, because he looked like a kangaroo. He was upright, and you're like, this is embarrassing to watch. It didn't do any favors for McGregor, but it didn't do any favors for Mayweather either. He's literally just in it now for the money, and it's embarrassing.
You say it didn't do any favors, but I think they both walked away with a serious amount of money, and that is boxing is the perfect place for these exhibition fights to take place, because if Logan Paul, Jake Paul, whoever it is, swimming pool, they could go into an MMA ring or an MMA cage, for instance, and get completely annihilated because they're going to have to focus on so many different methods of finishing. Whereas boxing, there's been controversy with regards to boxing being fixed for so many years, and these guys are making so much money. Askren can win, lose, draw, get completely knocked out in the first round. He's going to go home with millions. He's going to go home with a briefcase of cash to his family, so he never has to work again. Mayweather just adds to his total in his bank account. Conor McGregor managed to buy a yacht and probably used a lot of the money to fund his Proper 12 business with the money he made from the Mayweather thing. So boxing's the perfect promotion to be able to make money in, whereas UFC, MMA, etc. is where the true fighters go, really, because boxing can always be fixed, as can MMA, but it's less likely, I feel, that you could fix an MMA bout and have it look staged almost. Mayweather's just doing it for the money. He's doing it for the laughs, like all these Logan Pauls, Josh Paul, whatever. They're just doing it for the money at the end of the day. And it's the fans that are suffering. But the YouTubers, it's the people that are this YouTube generation that love to see Jake Paul and Logan Paul do anything. I think he was opening Pokemon cards the other day and it got millions and millions of views. And these people are going to be brought to the sport of boxing. That's the one good takeaway point, I think. These kind of people, these YouTube generation people are going to be watching this fight and go, wow, he's got gloves on and he's punching this other guy. I wonder what this sport is called. Let me have a look into this. Oh, wow, there's people that are better than him. Oh, look, that guy went and did MMA. Look, they kick each other over there. And then all of a sudden, you've got this giant generation who are maybe not very interested in boxing and stuff. I've got younger siblings myself, and they're just on video games and watching these YouTubers. They don't know about MMA, for instance. So for them, seeing these people do these kind of things, it brings them to the sport. So I think that's the one good takeaway point from these kind of joke fights, that you're bringing more eyes to the sport, not necessarily from a combat kind of community, but from outside of that and the younger generations. I think that's probably the main kind of premise for these guys even fighting.
100%. I totally agree. The more people that you're bringing in to watch, it doesn't matter where they're coming from, it's always going to be a plus. On just the minus side for me, it can be wiped away in one go, where if Floyd Mayweather's fighting Logan Paul or the Chinese guy or any of these, shouldn't be on the record. He won 48, 49 fights. The list of people that he fought are world-class boxers, and he's tainting his legacy by adding to his record with these frumps, because 100% the YouTubers fight each other, fight Mayweather, but it's got nothing to do with boxing. It's just, you're boxing a world champion, and it's going to be promoted as Logan Paul, hundreds of millions of followers on Instagram, and he does his stupid videos of doing crazy things, which is, and I've seen a few of them, it's amusing for the younger generation. It's funny. But then come and fight Mayweather, he's generating as much interest or more interest than. In fact, I think it was a funny. I think it was the KSI fight against Logan Paul, and you've got the boxing fraternity is there watching. It was a terrible looking fight. It didn't resemble boxing, and then afterwards it panned to the crowd, and you had all these commentators there who were obviously boxing commentators from around the world, and then behind them you had people I've never heard of, but my son was going, "Oh, that's so-and-so YouTuber, that's so-and-so YouTuber." And you had a row of these world famous YouTubers, and they were all interviewing Logan Paul and KSI. And then behind them, you had Steve Bunce. And he looked like a granddad waiting at a schoolyard for his kids to come out of school. It was hilarious. So these guys can generate the interest, which is great for boxing. But on those silly fights when they're fighting, has-beens, really, because Mayweather's a has-been. He's 40 plus. He's not going to fight a Canelo again. So set it aside and have it as a separate entity. It's still boxing. They're still coming over to watch boxing, but not hyped up in a way that you're fighting the best fighter ever, because you're not, because the guy's in his 40s. If you want Jake Paul to fight the best fighter at the moment, put him in the ring against Canelo and see how many seconds he lasts. Because it's for me, it's a bit. I 100% agree about the audience, but you're tainting your legacy. If Calzaghe comes back and fights a 25-year-old YouTuber, it'd be like, hold on, you're just getting your 50th fight. It's embarrassing for me. It's embarrassing.
It's just the way Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. did it recently, because I think they did, was it 8 rounds altogether? Yeah. And they had sort of set rules-ish, but they're both getting up there. We all knew it was an exhibition fight. It is what it is. But I think that was a lot more successful because we sort of knew what it was going into it, and it wasn't like any stupid tight. Was there a belt on the line or anything like that? Did they try and make like a no?
Some kind of invented belt, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like I don't know. He was coming back and it was going to be like a rubber match for Deontay Wilder, like chewed up fight for Wilder or Ortiz or something like that'd be crazy. Mm. We seem to have a period in MMA where fighters would win. It was just after McGregor called out Mayweather, to be fair. I think that was UFC 205 when he beat Alvarez. I remember that card, actually. I went to bloody used to work in Harrogate and live in Leeds, so I remember staying up all night to watch it. You're like, oh, it's 5:30. I'll have a shower and go to work then, shall I? Lovely. But there was a period where they were these sort of top 5 in any division fighter would win, and they'd call out a boxer. No, what are you doing? Stuff it. Jimmy Manuwa did it when he can't remember who he knocked out, but I think he knocked someone out at UFC London. David Haye was in the crowd. This was David Haye fresh off multiple little toe excuses and getting his ass handed to him by Tony Bellew. Jimmy Manuwa was calling David Haye out. It's like, dude, do you not want to make a run at like the title in your own sport? Why are you? I get you trying to cash in on the payday. I'm fighting the other name. And you might fancy yourself in that, you're going in, you're doing boxing sessions every 2 or 3 days in your camp. You probably fancy yourself as a bit of a boxer, don't you? But you're not specializing in your area. And that's why, like when we said before, there's been jiu-jitsu guys that have come into MMA and really struggled. Gokhan Saki, world champion kickboxer, come over a couple of years ago. I think he might have won a couple, lost a couple, but I remember Joe Rogan talking about sort of his level of striking might be something dangerous in the middleweight or light heavyweight. He's a bigger lad anyway. But I think it was the ground game, just the lack of grappling ability that really negated his push for anything. But then you get people like Adesanya who's fighting this weekend. What was it? 80-5 as kickboxer. I think he's had 106 professional wins in boxing, kickboxing, and MMA.
100 fights, at heavyweight, light heavyweight, and 185. That's it. It's kind of walk around weight, yeah.
It's just crazy, but like he's come into that from a completely different sport, and he's just managed to completely different. It's most of the striking of MMA, isn't it? And would you say he's really been tested on the mat? I think Gastelum probably gave him the best go of it. I'd like to see Yoel Romero give him a bit of a thing with his wrestling pedigree, but that was a weird fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, terrible. Tavares probably did the best work going 5 rounds with him in the main event. taking him down quite a lot. He looks very good on the ground as well, but that's obviously his game plan going into it is to not get taken down. But if he does get taken down, you know, he managed to reverse Brad Tavares from, you know, he had his back trying to sink a rear naked choke in. Adesanya literally like flipped over and then managed to take his back somehow. So, but yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, threw up a triangle on Gastelum as well, and Paulo Costa's throwing a white belt at him at the weigh-in. It's like, dude, did you not see his other fight? Like, I mean, you learn a triangle like, fairly. I think we learned it a couple of months into jiu-jitsu. It's not, you know, it's off your back out of guard, isn't it? But sort of see that against a pretty decent wrestler passing one arm in the guard, one out, and just throwing it on. It's sort of knowing how to do something and actually reacting to it in a fight. It's two completely different things. Who are you thinking for Adesanya Blakovic, actually, mate?
I've kind of watched, you know, I've got a lot of free time at the moment being furloughed, so I watched all of Blachowicz fights in the UFC. I watched all of Izzy's fights in the UFC as well, and I don't know. I really don't know. Blachowicz is going to come in maybe 25 pounds heavier than Izzy. Izzy's going to keep his distance. They're both very good strikers. It could go either way. That is the joy of MMA as opposed to boxing. In boxing, traditionally, there's one guy that's going to take it, and it's pretty kind of one-sided. At the weekend, obviously, Canelo just looked, you know, he looked miles above. It was just a joke that he was even in there. I get it. He had to fight, you know. I get that bit, which goes back to the politics of it as well. But no, I think it's just going to be a very, very tough fight for both of them, hopefully. And in MMA, you just don't know. You know, you just don't know who's going to win, who's going to lose. As you said earlier about Amanda Nunes, she was, when she fought Ronda Rousey, she was the underdog going into that fight. A big underdog as well, because Ronda Rousey was coming back and she was the big star at the time, and she got completely pieced apart. We see upsets all the time. You could bet the favorite every single weekend, and you know you're going to lose 50% of them because you just don't know when someone's going to get clipped. You just don't know. I'm just really looking forward to it. I hope it's going to be about lives up to the hype. You know, it's with such a big card as well, and with the 259 that we have. You know, Dominic Cruz fighting on the prelims is just humongous as well. You know, we've got Ratchik fighting, we got Thiago Santos fighting, such big names. And it's these kind of cards that you see completely flop with regards to decision after decision after decision. If all three main events go to decision, that's an hour and 15 minutes of UFC and MMA that we've got to watch. And is that going to be enjoyable? I don't know. Are we going to want to sit through five rounds of 5 minutes 3 times? It's going to be a long old time. So if anything, I do hope someone gets knocked out and it happens quickly, you know, but Blachowicz has got a lot of power. Izzy's got a lot of speed. Izzy's got a lot of power. You just don't know. Who have you got?
I mean, well, if anyone's listening, they're not going to see this, but I'm just going to stand up and reveal who I'm supporting for.
The Last Style Bender.
Bender. Love that boy. Love that guy. I can just, like you said though, it's a case of if Izzy can negate Jan's power with his speed, can Jan negate Izzy's speed by catching him coming in or out with his power? I'd be very surprised if this goes to the mat at any point or there's any grappling engagements. You look at what Izzy did to Costa, just chipping away at the leg. He's always sort of setting feints and setting traps with his movement, just reading, downloading your data, looking at your footwork patterns. One thing I've noticed listening to a few previews and that people have seemed to spot, Jan's got a bit of a tendency to sort of barrage forward with about 4 or 5 strikes and keep his chin up. I think that's how Thiago Santos managed to catch him because he finished him a couple of fights ago, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting that they've got Santos and Rakic on that card as well. That might be almost like maybe not quite a number 1 contender because you've probably got Reyes and maybe 1 or 2 others knocking around light heavyweight at the minute. But since John Jones has jumped out, that's blown the doors off that division wide open. Same with Izzy coming up to go for 2 belts. But I just think Jan as well, when he's going back, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but he'll sort of set his arms out and lean his chin back quite far. Like You notice when a lot of people do this, it's quite easy to, it's quite easy to sort of bring the hook around the guard, or in Izzy's case, he's got the really long legs, just slap a roundhouse kick around the side, just any sort of strike that comes around the block with him moving away. I think it could potentially be lights up. But Dominic Reyes pushed John Jones for 5 rounds. We're going into that fight thinking, mate, Dom Reyes is the generational light heavyweight coming through. Look at what he did to probably the GOAT of light heavyweight. And then Jan knocks him out in the second round. Like, that's the thing. Hardest sport to bet on in the world.
Yeah. And, you know, I rewatched that fight, and I watched it a few times when Blachowicz fought Luke Rockhold. He looked absolutely fantastic. Yeah. His clinch work was beautiful. And then he seems to catch people with very awkward shots. When he knocked out Corey Anderson, it was like a shovel punch. He was kind of fading to the left, shovel punched with the right, and caught him so clean on the chin. It was just lights out. Luke Rockhold, it was a fadeaway left hook, just completely ripped his face off. And he's got so much power in these awkward shots. Imagine what he can do when he's hitting you with a 1-2, or, you know, he's coming in with a hook backhand or something like that. And I get what you mean with regards to him coming in and leaving his chin up, but he's got a chin. You know, he's got a very, very good chin. Yeah. He is a true 205er as well. Obviously, Izzy said, I don't know if you saw the Ariel Helwani interview as well. Izzy said he's going to come in at 195, 193 maybe. He might be pushing 200, whereas Blachowicz is going to come in at 220. Easy.
Is he not cutting any weight for that one then?
He said, I'm going to continue with doing what I'm usually do. I'm going to go in the sauna. I'm going to do my usual routine to keep me mentally prepared. But at the end of the day, it's a win-win for Izzy. You know, if he goes up and loses, he's the guy that dared to go up and dared to fight for the bigger belt and the bigger guys and stuff like that. If he wins, happy days, he's got 2 belts, but then he's going to have to fight someone like Thiago Santos or Racic or Reyes or one of these guys that's up there, you know. I think it's a win-win situation for both of these fighters. Blachowicz, he can go back to Poland and probably buy half of it with the money that he's going to be making from this bout, you know. And at the end of the day, you're only in MMA for a very short amount of time, hopefully, you know, unless you want to be Overeem and fight until you're 42, or you are Romero when you're 44 or something, but you're in it for a very, very short amount of time. And I think quite a lot of people nowadays have got into this mindset of, right, I'm going to be 27 when I get into the UFC. I need to be out, done and dusted by 34. And I need to make as much money as possible in that time. Fight the biggest names, call out the biggest people. It goes back to your point earlier about calling out boxers and stuff. And that was at a time when people needed to make money. These, you know, a few of the guys that I know that fight for Bellator and stuff, they might be on a 10-10. And that's, you know, you're not gonna be able to afford to live and to do camps and nutritionalists and people in your corner and stuff on a 10-10. You're just not going to be able to do it. So you need to call out these bigger names to get these big money fights, you know, and you know, it's fantastic. These guys are doing it. Izzy's going to walk away with a good amount of money. So is Blachowicz. Both of these guys are going to make a ridiculous amount of money at the weekend. Not Conor McGregor money, but they're going to be well paid, you know, and that's fantastic for them. It's fantastic for the sport as well to gain money into the sport. And you're wearing an Israel Adesanya t-shirt, so you would have bought that t-shirt, right? So that's money exactly, in his pocket. Exactly. Man. That's money in his pocket.
You're starting to see though these. I mean, you had McGregor and Rousey, probably a few. Brock Lesnar, he's a crossover star. Yeah. You're starting to see more and more and more of the. I can't. Don't get me wrong, mate. I don't think Brock Lesnar should have been in the UFC at all. But that's another can of worms we're not going to touch today because we can go for another hour. And yeah, you just like. I don't really rate him that much, but you saw Masvidal get a bit of star power with the whole Askren knockout and a bit of a rivalry between Usman. I don't really see him as much more than the journeyman boxer.
He's training Jake Paul, isn't he?
Yeah, he is actually.
He's training Jake Paul for his boxing fight because of who he is. Because he's a good boxer? No, because it's a face that has a lot of notoriety that can bring a lot more faces and a lot more money to the sport. At the end of the day, that's what it's about.
And I guess there's that thing getting in Askren's head. Oh, shit, he's got that guy training me, knock me out in 5 seconds and embarrass me in front of the whole world on a main card. So there's that sort of mental side of it as well. But Izzy, like, he's becoming he's probably already a global superstar in fairness, but he's got that endorsement deal with Puma now. I saw an advert for him the other day. I've had a bit of a mixed relationship with Puma because they started making Arsenal kits a while ago. And they've stopped now, gladly, because they weren't really shit for a few years. But like for the first few, I quite liked it, and so they've got that old school Jamaican Winter Olympic style, like all those old sort of that old gear, but yeah, I just think like you said, with them trying to sort of cash in as much as they can, with having a brand like the UFC to use as a platform to spring yourself off, it's so much easier for fighters nowadays with social media and everything to get those deals, get those bigger fights. Almost like we were saying before with some boxers talking themselves into the room, but you've got to put yourself there in the first place, haven't you? Who's to say that? Like, I don't know, John Jones fighting at 23 against Shogun, becoming the youngest champion, opening up that fight with a flying knee. How effing arrogant can you be against one of the most terrifying Muay Thai clinicians to step into that cage? Like, and he became the youngest champion, and he became a star, catapulted himself, started running over pregnant ladies after coke binges and stuff like that. But you almost have to sort of use the tools you're given to you by the UFC and your own will and initiative to make something of yourself. And you can complain that, oh, now they don't have the sponsorship and the big, the banners, and they could wear whatever fight shorts they wanted, and they'd have Muscle Farm or the bad boy eyes on their arse cheeks or something. They can't make as much money. It's only like Conor and John Jones and Khabib who sell all the Reebok gear that get the deals from that. Yeah, fair enough. But how many fighters' stories and stuff is just, hey guys, try this CBD company, you'll get 20% off using this code, and you want to shave your balls, here's Manscaped.
Everyone seems to be followed by some sort of CBD company now. I don't understand that.
It's crazy, man. It's got my mum taking it now. Like, she has got leg pain. She's not a pothead, don't worry.
Yeah, she doesn't smoke the oil. No, I've seen no, you're right. I've seen a few of the boxers. I can't think of their names, but Anthony Fowler, I think, is one of them. He's on Twitter, and every other one is, you get retweet this for a chance to win 10 liters of this stuff that you can keep you going for the next 4 years. And yeah, you're right. That's the main one that they seem to be pushing is the CBD oil and all that kind of stuff. So obviously there's money in it for them, and they must be making some kind of cut from it. And good luck to them, because they're only it seems to be like the mediocre boxers. It's you're not going to get the high rankers because you don't need it, and you're not getting the bottom rung because they're trying to make their name in the sport. It's just the ones it may be the 30 fighters who've lost 7 or 8, had a couple of British titles, European, and then dropped back down. That seems to be the niche market for those kind of sponsors. That's the trend that I've seen, which is it's a weird one. But again, it's the new age, isn't it? It's the social media. If you can make money from it, as what you were saying just now, Conor, about making money. If you can make money from endorsing a product, they're going to give you the product, and it's the same with these Instagrammers. They're these influencers that the Kardashians. They're always going, here's this and something in the background, product placement on Coronation Street, and it's always you've got Coronation Street now. They've got everywhere you look, there's a co-op bag behind, and it's all subtle, but they're getting paid big money for it, So it's good luck to them. I would do it,
Absolutely.
Prize fighting at the end of the day.
And
yeah.
I've got like a little. I've got an Instagram page, right? And I do running and I do triathlons and stuff, and I just post about it all the time. And people get in touch with me and say, "Hey, can you do a competition?" Exactly like you just said. We'll send you some of our products if you can go do a competition for it in return. Am I going to say no? Of course, I'm not going to say no, because it gives me access to their followers almost, which is at the end of the day, the more followers you have, it generates more revenue. Exactly the same with doing YouTube videos and making podcasts and stuff. Once you get to a certain level of listening hours, you have a certain percentage that you can be advertised. Do you know what I mean? You can add a level of cost, and you can add a price to the amount of advertising that you can have. So if you have 1 million people watching and 5 million viewing hours, you can literally ask You know, I think Kim Kardashian gets like 250K per post, you know, and there will be a lot of people in the kind of next 10 to 15 years that their job title will just say influencer. You know,
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate. I've been sent quite a lot of things through my own personal Instagram. You know, I had my windows cleaned the other day. A guy messaged me on Instagram and said, "Can I clean your windows if you post about us on Instagram?" I said, "Yeah, sure. You want to come around and clean my windows? No problem, man. No problem at all." So it's not just the people in that kind of domain with regards to CBD oil, which has been huge over the past couple of years anyway, or people, you know, trying to sell fighting merchandise, or for me, triathlon merchandise. It's people that just want to find that advertising space instead of being on the side of a bus. People don't get buses anymore. They've got electric scooters, you know, and what they're doing when they're on their electric scooters, listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video, or they're listening to something that's going to be able to provide advertising, that's going to have advertising content on it, you know. So I think it's crazy. My windows are gleaming and I didn't pay a penny for it. All I did was press 3 buttons and write a little caption. I'm living the dream here.
But that's the thing. It's about followers. The Jeff Bezos, Amazon's soon to be chief guy. It's the one word that makes the most money on the planet: data.
Exactly.
It's all about the data. So if they can produce numbers in whatever way they do it, then you're gonna get people piggybacking on the back of their name. As you said, like McGregor with his proper 12. He's done well from that. Anthony Joshua's on every other advert on Facebook.
Under Armour, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah. He's obviously that's one of his sponsors, but you've got all these different. There's so many ways to make money in certain sports more than others. But yeah, the social media aspect has taken off, for the good, the bad, and the ugly in all sports. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. You mentioned Canelo earlier. Obviously, he's got a fight now coming up with Billy Joe Saunders. What's your take on that?
What do you think, mine? I mean, I'm just a boxing casual. I'm just going to go Canelo all day.
I'm not going to disagree with you, mate, but if anybody is going to give Canelo sort of as much trouble as anyone possibly could, I'm going to guess Billy Joe Saunders. He's also got that sort of arrogant shithousery bit in him where he can just get under your skin at a weigh-in, and he can be sort of slagging you off in the media and just play the mind games that I don't know if it's a bit like with Tyson, with his opponents, with Canelo. But it almost seems like with some guys, he might not necessarily have them beaten before they get in the ring, but they'll sort of get in there for 1 or 2 rounds, and I don't really think Yildirim tried to get anything going. Did he? Threw a couple of jabs. I can't really remember him throwing anything else, but it's like almost they try a few things, a bit like Josh Kelly against David Avanesian. It's almost like he's trying a few things like, oh, bugger it, okay, this isn't working. I don't really have a second game plan how to beat Canelo, so I'll just see if I can outlast him. I think I don't know if Callum Smith came a bit unstuck with that, thought he could use his range and his footwork to outdo, but just got out Canelo'd by Canelo almost. It's an interesting fight though. I'm very happy it's been so. Sorry?
He got punched in the arm quite a lot. That was Canelo's game plan going into that, wasn't it?
Yeah. His arm was in a hell of a state. I think this is going to be his hardest fight since Golovkin. He beat. Did he fight Liam Smith? He fought Smith, didn't he? He fought Smith. Yeah. He fought Callum Smith. He fought Rocky Fielding. Knocked him out in the first couple of rounds. I think his last 4 or 5 fights, Canelo's, have been very, very easy. He fought Golovkin twice. I thought Golovkin beat him once, and the draw, it could have been a draw. If it had gone a win, it would have gone Golovkin for me.
Definitely.
on both. So Saunders hasn't got the power to knock him out, but he's definitely got the skill to. He could win it on points. My only thing with Saunders is he's never been tested. He fought Chris Eubank Jr. I thought
Eubank tested him for a good 7-8 rounds, I think.
I thought it was the other way around. I thought that Saunders took him to school for 7 or 8 rounds and then Eubank came back the last few. But that, that was a long time ago. They've both improved by then, since then. But I just think that if anybody could beat him, I think it could be Saunders. He hasn't been hit. So if Canelo can't hit him, like Canelo couldn't hit Mayweather, I know it was a long time ago, but Mayweather took him to pieces. He was 23, but he'd still had nearly 30 fights. The guy's been fighting since he's 16 and a half. So to say that he wasn't experienced fighting against Mayweather, he'd been fighting for 7-8 years. He was 30-0 or 29-0. He was a massive Mexican prospect. At the time, it was Saul Alvarez. There was no Canelo involved. It was Saul Alvarez. And I remember him coming up through the ranks. But Saunders, he's an elusive character. He's very, very hard to hit. A bit like what Canelo is at the moment. Canelo, for his last 5 or 6 fights, his head movement has improved. Whether it's improved because he's improved it, or whether it just looks like it's improved because his opponents have been crap. People have been, they were hyping up Callum Smith. Callum Smith, he's got a good chance. He's the world. What is he? What's the main belt?
World.
No, it's not the
WBA.
No, you've got the WBA, the WBC, you've got all the belts, but then you've got
is it the Ring magazine?
Like the Ring magazine, the Lil Neal one, like what Tyson Fury has self-proclaimed himself as having on the heavyweight. He's the silver belt champion, the gold. Oh, he's all these belts. Yeah, Canelo's coming up. But I watched Callum Smith a couple of years before on the undercard of I was down in the O2, Kell Brook and Golovkin.
Oh, yeah.
And he was about 2 or 3 fights before him, fighting a nobody. He was dreadful. And you can't improve that much in 2 years. He was sick, whatever he is, 6'3", 6'4", fighting against a guy maybe 5'10", 5'11". And it took him 6 or 7 rounds, maybe 8 rounds to get this guy out of there. And he was an absolute nobody. And he was very, very poor. So when 2 years later, fast forward, he's beaten the George Groves, who was his last ever fight.
Way past
And I just thought he's going to get hammered. And it's exactly what happened. So this for me is a massive step up for Canelo. And if he does beat Saunders convincingly, or he wins on points and actually wins on points, not just because he's Canelo points, then I think you can then really class him as, one of the greats in his super middleweight category. But it's tough. It's interesting, but I think it's the fight that I'm looking forward to out of all the ones that are coming up. Because apparently Fury and Joshua have been, it's been confirmed as June, not an actual date or a venue, but June is the, Bob Arum came out yesterday.
I think I did remember seeing some on social media. They are targeting it for June. Which should be, I think they're going for fans in a limited capacity, aren't they? Something like that.
I'd be very surprised if it's not in Dubai or Saudi Arabia, because money-wise, you've got your pay-per-view, which I think is going to be massive. How they're going to sell it in America, I don't know. Whether Fury will have to go out there and have a 3-round WWE fight against some American just to get his name out there. But I think it'll be one of the biggest pay-per-views in boxing history. It very, very rarely happens when 2 unbeaten heavyweights collide, and they're both British and they're both very popular to totally different fan bases. And it's a 50-50 fight, you could say. He's going to win because of this. Like what you just said just now, Conor, about MMA. Most of the time, you can see, it's probably going to be him. He's got a chance, but it's probably going to be him. Whereas with the Canelo one, for me, it's, probably Canelo, but there's a very good chance that Saunders could upset it. Whereas with the other one, it's Fury will box Joshua's head off for 12 rounds, but can he last 2 rounds without Joshua knocking him out? Deontay Wilder was a hyped up 35 fight guy, never fought outside America. For me, piss poor. Hadn't fought anybody. He fought Ortiz is the only person he'd ever fought. Ortiz literally was 1 punch away from knocking him out in the 7th round. And and he was out on his feet, and he caught him in the next round with a massive haymaker, and then did the same in the next fight. Was outboxed for a few rounds, and that's the only punch that he had. And it showed with Fury that he took him apart in his fight, caught him in the first fight, never a draw. Fury won it hands down.
Oh, robbery!
Total rob. You mentioned about fixes. That's a fix there to get a second fight.
For the money.
Yeah, very good. All for the money and this, that, and the other. And it's a 50-50. If Joshua doesn't win it in 4 rounds, I think he's got so much muscle and lactic acid buildup. Even though he's lost a couple of stone and he was a lot better against Klitschko when he dropped from his 18.5 stone down to maybe 17 stone, big difference. But for me, it's if he catches him, and he's got much more power and he's got much more accuracy and he's a better boxer than Wilder is. So he's going to definitely give Fury trouble. But if it goes past 4 or 5, Fury can just run rings round him.
I think as in Fury, for the second Wilder fight, he had a fair drop it, or did he put more weight on for the second fight? I can't remember. He went one way or the other as well.
He put a bit of weight on, mainly because he wanted to lean on
more
him
power in that,
and lay him down. But I think the big diff for me, there's out of those 3 fighters, you've got Deontay Wilder's 15.5 stone. So he's walking around at 15 stone, 15.5 stone. Obviously, you don't need a cut weight at heavyweight, so he could just stay as he was. Joshua in the Olympics, as an Olympic heavyweight, you've got to be under 90 kilograms. So you're talking 14.5. No, so I think it was 14 stone.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, you got the Welsh flag behind you, Kevin Evans. We'll get him on the show soon. He's 16-time Welsh heavyweight amateur champion. So I know that 91 kilograms is the thing. So in 2012, Anthony Joshua was 14 stone or whatever 91 kilos is, 14 stone and a couple of pounds. Mm-hmm. And he's had to build up. So he's had to put on 3 to 4 stone of muscle. So you're talking 27, 28 kilograms of muscle. So to last 12 rounds without building up lactic acid, as you know as a triathlete, it's near impossible to go 12 rounds without burning up. You can't do it because he's muscle bound. Whereas Fury, if you look at him out in, where was the World Cup? Germany, I think it was, when he was out there with the Irish boys and he was walking around 25 stone. So he's a guy that's come from 25 stone. He's dropping 7 stone and still being 18 stone. So he's running around as if he's a flyweight. So he could go 20 rounds. So I think that's the deciding factor. If Joshua pounds him in 4, he's gone. But if it goes past 5, 6, Joshua's not going to last. And I don't care how much he trains, it doesn't matter because he's got too much muscle.
Yeah, I don't think you can put it any plainer than that, really. They've both got their styles. Fury, he's just, how can he move like that for a man of his size and weight and height? It just defies logic. But it's that sort of gypsy boxing school. I think Billy Joe Saunders has a lot of it because they're both descended from traveller families, aren't they? So you get that sort of rope-a-dope style. Are they so? Oh, are they actually? I thought they were. I knew they were quite close because they always
they train together. Yeah.
But yeah, like I just love Fury's style so much, and he's such a likable character as well. I really enjoyed reading this book. Joe Rogan podcast was phenomenal as well, talking a lot about when he did beat Klitschko in Munich. I remember watching that one at uni as well. It was a cracking fight. Sort of the depression he felt after that because you've been working your whole life to become world champion.
Did you learn anything in uni, or did you just watch boxing?
Boxing MMA. Yeah, basically. Found the love for the ADCC Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. Played in many failed bands and got myself a music degree. So, yeah, all right. Got out of real for 5 years, so I can't complain.
Yeah. That's a bonus.
Cheers, mate. I was going to say, in London, you get your flipping windows cleaned for free. We'd probably get a brick through ours around there. So,
I've been to Rill. It's that rough in Rill that the window cleaners are going to stand up.
it was funny, I went to climb Snowdon and stuff, walk up the
Oh,
side
yeah.
of a mountain or whatever, and there was UFC on that night. I can't remember for the life of me what card it was. And I was awake, I was watching it, all the people that I was with were all asleep, and then I heard this giant commotion outside. We're in the middle of nowhere here, near Snowdon, and then there was a load of Welsh kids outside just throwing hands at each other. And I thought, wow, I've got live fighting on my phone, and then I've got live fighting out the window. So I actually put my phone in between the blinds, and I was just watching these people fight outside as well as watching on my phone. There's nothing to do there, so you'll just fight each other. I'm pretty sure of it.
This is why you get people being so good at rugby and stuff like that. 'Cause in some of the places, there is literally just a dead couple of villages from the declining of the mining industry in the industrial era, and you either play a sport, get really good at an instrument, or get really smart in a subject at school, or you're sort of just running around town throwing rocks at cats and weird stuff like that, Or in our case.
I was saying to Martin earlier, because obviously we got fingers crossed we beat Italy on the week after next, and then we play France, for the Grand Slam. And I've got at the moment 4 of the 5 guests have confirmed, but one of them is an ex-Welsh international. One of them is a Welsh international who played for the British Lions. Another one actually plays for Wales at the moment. One of them is a fitness coach who used to fitness coach for Wales, and the other one is the Wales Sevens coach. And they all come from my town. And I had one of them on a few weeks ago, and he was in the 1970s British Lions team that went to South Africa, and it's the only time the British Lions have come back unbeaten. They won 15 games in a row. And that was a question that I asked him, was how come we've got so many people from our area that was so good at rugby? We got world-class rugby players, football players. Matthew Stevens, a snooker player. We got, the sport down there is phenomenal. And that was his answer. Nothing else to do. He literally was laughing, and he was obviously he's Roy now. He had his 70th birthday a few weeks back, and he's like a family friend of my mother's. And he said, when I was living, by your mother in the 1950s, that there was 2 channels on a black and white TV, and your parents, there was no remote control, so your parents had full command of the TV, and it was, you go outside and you play, or you're bored sitting in the house. I suppose pretty much like now in lockdown, there's nothing you can do. Whereas back then there's nothing you can do, so you go out and play, and that was it. And I think it's to this. I looked at the stats for because obviously the rugby's coming up in the next 2 weeks, and I was looking at the statistics, and Wales has only got 3.5 million people, whereas England is like 65 million, and England have won 13 Grand Slams, and if we win this week, we'll have won 13 Grand Slams. For per capita, that's just phenomenal for a country. Wales and New Zealand really are on a par with the amount of people that they've got, and the amount of trophies that they've won in their main sport is just incredible. So if you set your mind to something like, Brett is a Welsh guy, and he must be from. He's a Welsh guy, UFC fighter, Brett Johns. Brett Johns.
Yep.
I know he's from my town. I've got no idea who he is, but a lot of my friends are congratulating him on Twitter, and then he's messaging them back as if he knows them. So they obviously he's from down that area. I know nothing about him whatsoever apart from that he's Welsh and he's a UFC fighter. I think he's pretty good because he was out in Vegas fighting, and he won some fight out there.
Yeah, he went. He's just signed with Bellator about 4 or 5 months ago, but he went 5-2 in the UFC. Actually, did really well. One of the 2 people that beat him is Aljamain Sterling, who's fighting for the bantamweight belt this weekend. So, but he's a really, I think he started out doing judo, so he's really, really high level grappling. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, under a guy called Chris Rees. He's, I think their gym's based in Swansea. It's the Chris Rees Academy.
Okay.
Got a 3-weight Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion from Wales called Ash Williams. That's in a promotion called Polaris. Really good submission grappling promotion if anyone's interested in that.
I know the one, Polaris.
Yeah, mate. But Ash Williams, 3-weight champion in that. Can't remember the name of the other one. He holds a belt in another one of them. And I think he was a no-gi champion at the ADCC as well. So again, that's a case of, I remember seeing a few interviews with him. Him and his brother played rugby and football for a bit. Just got bored of it, really. So started doing martial arts. I think they started with judo, then just moved on to jiu-jitsu because it was there. But so you have little things, eh? You have sports clubs to go to. Same with me, getting into swimming. Like my mum did swimming when she was younger. I was in the pool from quite a young age. Didn't really sort of resonate with me as much as it did with her, but it was fun. But it's sort of little things like that set you up to go into sport later on in life and just pick up little skills and activities. And if you'd have asked me when I was 10, was super into football, probably want to be a commentator. I probably knew I didn't have the skill to be a pro footballer by that point, but probably said I want to do commentary or something, be in the circle or a manager.
You're there. You've made it. You've made it.
I know.
The microphone in front of you.
Got my own show, mate, like a right little, like one of those YouTubers I was moaning about 2 hours ago. But I never thought like, oh yeah, well you're gonna grow a fucking emo fringe, listen to nothing but Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax for about 6 years and get a music degree end year. But but it's just a testament to people's hard work. And I can't even remember what the first thing it was. Now I've gone on that much of a tangent. So
Brett Johns.
Brett Johns, yeah, great fighter. Bellator, Scott Coker, match him up for God's sake. You've got Juan Archuleta defending that bantamweight belt soon. I think they're matching Patchy Mix and James Gallagher up, which is gonna be fireworks because that is some high level grappling on that fight. And Archuleta's Sergio Pettis, isn't he? That's gonna be an interesting title defense. Yeah. But you got a few sleepers in that Bellator bantamweight division, so I think Brett can make a bit of a run there. And the UK fighters, there's always been that rhetoric that the grappling just there's never been there compared to what it is with the Americans. Yeah. I think a lot more now, especially going back to what you said, Connor, fighters training mixed martial arts, not just one discipline. A lot of those advantages are being negated now, and you are seeing some of but Jack Shaw's a very good example. Very heavy pressure in his grappling. And it's not like he's using a lot of counter wrestling either or getting taken down himself. He's the one engaging in the clinches, taking someone's back, shooting for singles and doubles. And it's not just like grab a leg lazily. He's using his shots to set it up cleverly. Helps that your dad's one of the best MMA coaches in Wales. I mean, but even in Wales,
it surprises me what you're saying there about the Americans being better at the floor work. When again, just as I say, I'm not familiar with it, but when you look at the Olympics and when you look at martial arts on the whole, the Brits and the Europeans have a lot more success in the Olympics than the Americans in judo, karate, taekwondo, all three disciplines. There's been plenty of medalists, not just Britain, in Europe compared to America. There's not many Americans that are successful in those sports.
It's mainly the wrestling, I think, for the Americans. They have the odd judoka coming over here, Ronda Rousey.
She was good at judo.
Was Edmund Shabazian a judoka, or did they just train? I think they just trained together. But yeah, it's mainly wrestlers for the Americans. But I think it's because wrestling in college, college and high school at a collegiate level, it basically doesn't exist here. No. I think you do have wrestling in the UK because I think Tom Breeze was a UK wrestling champion or an English wrestling champion years ago before he started MMA. Be nice to see him make a bit of a run soon, actually, as well. He's a bit of a sleeping giant, one of the English fighters.
When you're watching MMA, though, as a naive MMA person, it seems to me that wrestling doesn't come into it as much on the floor as if you were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or those kind of martial arts.
I think it's about knowing. Sorry.
It just depends on the fighter. It depends on the style of the style that the fighter has and the quickest route to victory. ultimately, because, you know, as many fighters have said, they don't get paid overtime to be in there. So if they can finish it quickly, they will finish it quickly. You know, so when it does hit the ground, wrestling, naturally the end game is to pin the shoulders onto the mat. If you were to pin the shoulders onto the mat in MMA, the other guy's just going to look at you, probably, you know, try and sweep your leg and sink a leg lock or an ankle, you know, try and ankle pick you while you stood up or something like that. Whereas, you know, people use their wrestling transitions and wrestling takedowns to then get to the ground to then execute either their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills or their striking skills with regards to ground and pound and top control and stuff like that. So it just goes back to being a solid mixed martial artist. And the quickest route to victory is always going to be the best way. As Mike was saying earlier, there's a lot of people that come into the UFC especially and come from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. Paul Craig, for instance, who's Scottish and he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master. You can see that he's always pushing to take the fights to the ground. He's always pushing to get straight on the ground because that's where he feels the safest. You know, and he's going to face an elite level striker that's not going to let him get to the ground, or an elite level wrestler that's not going to let him get to the ground. And, you know, that will be his kind of demise. And has he got hands? Yeah, he has got hands, but are they amazing? Probably not. So, you know, it's tough. It is tough. But in America as well, it's like cheerleading. In the UK, we have cheerleading. There's cheerleading competitions, right? But no one knows about it because it's a very American thing. Same as wrestling. We have a guy on the Fight and Talk show called Brian over in America, in Illinois, I believe. And
Mad Dog.
Mad Dog MMA. Yeah, shout out to Brian. He's absolutely fantastic. Started watching the show, got in touch, said, "Can I jump on?" I said, "Yeah, sweet." And, you know, he's great to talk to as well. And he's come from a wrestling background himself. He gets his kids to do wrestling, you know, almost like 20, 30, you know, 15, 20 years ago, maybe, you know, before that, I wouldn't know, I wasn't born. So people always got their kids into boxing. You know, my dad did boxing for a small amount of time. His dad did boxing for a small amount of time. And you kind of get all your kids to try and get into boxing because it's just what you do. You do boxing, rugby or football, predominantly those three things. And you either, you know, I was very fortunate. I did all three of them in high school and stuff like that. But, you know, it just depends what you get into as a kid, you know, like all the Dagestani guys coming into MMA, they all have this Sambo background because that's what they do from birth. You know, that is just the country's sport. So they just do it, you know, so, but yeah, I mean, I think wrestling's fantastic. I wish I'd have done wrestling at school. Oh. I've done numerous wrestling classes and it is grueling. It is so painful. Do you know what I mean? One of the guys I was rolling with, I was like, "Why are you here?" And he said, I got divorced from my wife and I've got all this energy and anger that I have. I want to take it out on someone. And I thought, oh, fantastic. You know, he was like 35. I think I was 25 at the time. And I'm rolling with him and you could just see the anger in his eyes. I was like, oh, great. This is going to be so much fun. But you're just dripping in sweat, completely dripping. You know, you don't get those kind of exercises anywhere else. I wish they exposed kids to more kind of combat disciplines when they're younger. I really do, especially in the UK. Just expose them to all of them. They don't like them, they don't want to do them, you know?
Yes, judo is the same. I did judo from the age of 4. My man was a teacher. My brother's got, he's moved now to Bristol, but he had a martial arts school down in South Wales, and judo, same, it's all floor work, grappling, even when you're standing up. It was all in, you know, your wrists, your forearms used to wake, and yeah, obviously it's a heavy suit you're wearing as a 5-6-year-old being thrown everywhere, and yeah, it's but I think it's different now because I suppose people are a lot more knowledgeable. But back then, you do your 2-hour session, and every single time I'd go home, I'd lie on the settee, and I'd have a ridiculous headache. Obviously, it's dehydration. Back then, nobody knew anything about it, you know, because you're talking 30, yeah, exactly, 35, 40 years ago. And every, you know, pounding headache. And that's what put me off, you know, did it for a good few years, but, you know, you can't come home 2 or 3 times a week with a ridiculous headache. And that's all it would have been drink your water before and then afterwards, and you would have been totally fine.
Yeah, salt and sugar, you'd have been all right. Electrolytes.
Yeah, it's a simple little thing, you know, but it's, again, you live and learn.
Yeah, and it's knowledge to instill into, you know, this kind of like MMA frenzy that everyone's in at the moment and stuff like that. Well, I'd assume that most people that watch MMA now will try and get their kids into MMA and or to some sort of discipline of surrounding martial arts. I did karate when I was younger as well because that was the thing that was local to the house. That's just kind of what you do. Oh, right, the local school hall has karate on a Tuesday and a Thursday. We'll do that. And the boxing club was on a Sunday, so I'll just do that because it's closest. It's closest to the house. Whereas there's MMA gyms popping up now, all over the place. Whereas before we never have that. So it's just an evolution. I think it's just an evolution that will constantly be going on. There'll be more gyms and there'll be more things popping up. I found out there's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling place just up the road from me that I never knew was there. So it's like, you're actively searching these things out because you want to find them,
I think as well, it's probably a bit of an obvious statement to say, but back when I was doing karate, probably not as much as it was earlier when a lot of people talk about it in like the 80s and that. There was a bit of, if you were a karate guy and you wanted to go and do a judo class or do a jiu-jitsu class, it was slightly frowned upon that you were training outside. I don't know if it was just my senseis I had at the time that were a bit funny about that. The jiu-jitsu master we have now is perfectly sound with us training wherever we want if we want to do bloody kickboxing or something. But there's always like a rhetoric that, oh no, our martial arts are best, that's why we train karate. What's the fucking point of going and doing kung fu? There's nothing to it. Nothing to judo. What, you're going to learn how to throw someone out a window? Ugh. That sort of. I think mixed martial arts have proved once and for all. Yeah, in the early day, in the first couple of UFCs, Hoist Gracie would go in a gi and strangle people. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on? There's this tiny little 170-pound dripping wet Brazilian chap climbing onto super heavyweights' backs and just cinching the neck up. And then it was sort of the wrestler ground and pound style that caught everyone out because you were getting loads of wrestlers coming into MMA. You could name a whole list of people from like late 90s, early 2000s like that. And then you had still having the evolution of the strikers now a bit more, aren't you? Sort of the point fighter types like MVP, McGregor, Adesanya. It's just you get that constant evolution of you look how prominent leg kicks are becoming now. I mean, you're probably not going to enjoy picking up leg kicks. I think we're all sick of hearing about bloody calf kicks the last couple of weeks, but it's not exactly a new technique, but people have just realized how effective it can be.
Yeah, I think, I was having a conversation with my friend's very much into boxing. That's his thing. He's an MMA casual, whereas, we're the yin and yang to each individual sport. And I said, everyone's talking about these calf kicks. It's just boring. It's not a new thing, I've trained Muay Thai, and you get kicked in the shin, you get kicked in the leg, you get kicked in the side of the leg. It's not new, And then he said about Canelo punching this guy in the arm. He said people do it, and Lomachenko did the pull down the guard and literally just punch you in the face, right? It's not a new thing. It's almost like a trend and like a phase that people forget about. People forget, oh yeah, you know what? We can do that. I forgot we can do that. Because, Tyson Fury does it as well when he kind of uses the jab to almost hook slap, and then he comes over and fires the backhand, right? You're allowed to do that. It's perfectly legal. But I think people forget, and they get too caught up in trying to execute this perfect game plan that they forget that dirty boxing is a thing, and you can execute dirty boxing quite well. And in MMA, there's always going to be little kind of fads and phases that people are going to go through with, oh, I didn't realize, John Jones with the oblique kick, the kick to hyperextend the knee. Everyone, Joe Rogan would be in the commentating saying, well, this kick should be illegal because, it can cause some serious damage. As Robert Whittaker, when he fought Darren Till, the first couple of rounds, boom, straight in on the knee, completely ruined his knee, took away his movement. Perfectly legal strike. All of these strikes will be illegal unless you're punching in the back of the head, in the groin, or you're trying to fish hook someone or gouge their eyes out. All these things are going to be legal, So it's like in fashion, they just come back around,
Yeah.
Foot stomps. Yeah. Everyone stopped talking about foot stomps because Usman didn't use any last time out.
Shoulder strikes,
exactly. If you go back 20, 30 pay-per-views or 40, 50 fight cards, you're going to see people using shoulder strikes. Like I was saying, I watched the Jan Blachowicz early fights. He was still kicking the calf. He was, and this is only 4 or 5 years ago that he was kicking the calf. People have always kicked the calf. People just want something to talk about. And the main thing is because Conor McGregor got hit in the calf. That's the main thing that we can all take away from this. If he'd have got kicked in the calf and gone, you know what, I lost that fight, good game. no one would have said anything because he made such a big deal out of never being kicked in the calf before. Oh, you can't do anything about it. And, you know, the UFC just play on it as well, man. Yeah. The UFC just play on it and say to all of the people doing the interviews, just, ask him about calf kicks, see what he says, you know, make a big joke out of it. It's a perfectly legal strike. It's always going to be a legal strike. You're never going to make that shot illegal because it would just be ridiculous to ref. It would be another layer of reffing. You know, Big John McCarthy, when he wrote the rules, did he think, I'm going to not let people kick people in the leg? This is mixed martial arts. Grow a pair, learn how to either move your leg or just get out of the way. Kick the other guy in the leg first. You know what I mean? You're not allowed to, you can hold the mouth when they're on the floor, right? As I'm sure you know. You can put your hand over someone's mouth to stop them breathing. As soon as you put the hand over the mouth and the nose, you're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
You could hold someone's mouth closed, or you could hold someone's nose closed. You can cover someone's eyes. If you get elbowed in the head, you're bleeding everywhere. You can pour your own blood into their eyes while you're on the ground. You know, this is like no holds bar. And you want to stop someone from kicking someone. You know, it's just it's never going to happen. And that's my full rant on it. You know,
well,
I think the blood thing is underutilized.
It's sort of the whole argument. The idea of just Robbie Lawler sort of getting a handful, like flicking it at someone instead of like the little jab to drop the hand. It's
perfectly legal.
Sort of the same argument with the 6-12 elbow. Why you can't do that? Because when they were writing the unified rules, they saw him doing it on the ESPN cool karate videos, and they'd break a stack of bricks with their elbow. Like, well, if it can break a stack of bricks, think what it can do to someone. It's like you're literally letting someone run and jump and knee someone in the cranium. Like Cyborg Santos literally had his skull fractured live on Channel 5 by Michael Venom Page. And they cut to commercial for it. Yeah. I was watching that with my...
It was, it sounded worse live, trust me.
Oh, were you there? Oh my! I was watching on telly with my grandmother, and we were quite concerned when it cut to commercial. She's the one that got me into boxing. I should say her dad was quite into boxing. So he's like, "Oh God, I wonder what's happened." I'm like, I think we might have had a fracture because it was a flying knee, Joyce. But
this doesn't happen in Emmerdale.
Yeah, she's a tough black country lass. You know, they breathe them hard in the West Midlands, mate.
No, exactly like you say, man. He cracked his skull. It sounded terrible. I was ringside next to. I was talking to David Hay and stuff. Like Lennox Lewis was there as well, and like I said, I was training at the same gym as him. You know.
Oh, London Shoot Fighter. Yeah,
exactly,
of course.
Yeah. So
didn't put that together before.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool guys there. Page is one of them. He's a very nice bloke, actually. Very, very nice bloke. But yeah, like you say, man, Ben Askren could have died when he got hit in the side of the head. And, you know, this Cyborg guy, he retired after that and no one's ever seen him since. So, yeah, there's worse things that you can do than kick someone in the calf, exactly like you say. Exactly like you say.
Brilliant. Right, we'll finish it off then tonight with the just a couple of minutes because we talk about rugby next week because we got some cracking guests on. Thanks for coming on, Conor. Insight into I've seen a few MMA fights, know a little bit about it, but obviously nothing like you guys. To say boxing is more my thing. It's I don't know. It's pretty new to me. Obviously, it's been around for quite a while. But when you're into one sport, rugby, football, and boxing, you can't spread yourself too thin. When you're watching something a lot, plus obviously when you've got a missus and kids, you can't. You've got to keep you're spinning plates. But it's been good. Be good to have you on, and we'll come back on soon once, and we'll come on to your what's the name of your show and when's it on each week?
It's called the So my Twitter handle is @FightingTalk2. I look after the Twitter handle, and we're on Instagram as well, same name. And then I believe we're on at 6 o'clock on a Monday night on the Sportinarium radio station. It depends if we swear or not. Sometimes we'll push back a little bit later. You know, we get pretty het up about these things. And then on YouTube, same thing, Fighting Talk 2. We do a pre-fight, post-fight, and then any sort of topical conversation, naturally like leg kicks or the GOAT conversation, weight cutting we speak about as well. So lots of things transfer into various different other combat sports as well. So yeah, find us over there.
Brilliant. So just the last couple of minutes. Obviously, Wales playing against Italy next week. Great win against England. I don't know whether you watched it, Connor, but Wales played England in Cardiff, and we were. I suppose the easiest way to put it is we didn't play very well against Scotland and won. We didn't play very well against Ireland and won, and both teams because they had a man sent off. So it's the question of, right, okay, you're playing England now. England are favourites. If they keep on 15 men, how are they going to do against them? And to be fair, we played a lot better than we did against Scotland and Ireland. But there was 2 controversial tries, but controversial on English reporters' eyes, and not so controversial if you were Welsh. But the first try was Owen Farrell was called by the ref and to basically go and speak to his team. And he went to speak to his team, mainly to do with discipline. They'd had penalty after penalty after penalty. I was really surprised that he hadn't pulled out the yellow card, to be fair, on one, Itoji was constantly offside. And we were on the front foot, and Farrell went back to speak to his players. And on the English side of things, they've all gone back. Farrell's talking to them. Our outside half Bigger speaks to the ref and says, "Ref, when are you going to call, game on?" He turns round, calls time on. Bigger, cute outside half looks across to the wing, sees our winger, kicks it into the corner. Josh Adams dives, catches it in the air and scores the try. 2 things on the English side was, number one, you've just told me to go back and speak to my team, and within 15 seconds, you've called time on, and we're all talking to each other. And the second point was that, again, there's 2 interpretations, but apparently you shouldn't. The game shouldn't start when you've got people on the pitch, and there was water boys on the pitch. That was their argument. What were your thoughts? I'll give you my thoughts after. What were your thoughts on it? Just that try.
I'm always going to be super biased about this when we're playing England, so there's not a lot I really should say, to be honest with you. But first of all, how stupid is Owen Farrell to think that? Well, I think maybe it was partly lost in translation. I'm not being harsh on the ref because he's French. A lot of stuff in the media, they are probably putting the spin on it because it's a European ref, because obviously every single human being in Europe hates everyone on the British Isles now, apparently. If you've heard.
Somebody's changed the ref's Wikipedia handle that he's Welsh. It's hilarious.
Well, you know what? We're still waiting for the French to send all those troops over to help with the Welsh Revolution, so they owe us 1 or 2, don't you think?
Yeah.
But yeah, the referees told you to have a word with your team about your discipline. I agree with you about Mauro Itoje. I think he gave away 5 penalties. At least 2 of them were the same offence, being offside in the maul. If you get caught with that once and you get caught on the wrong side and everyone's pushing, fair enough. You're a professional elite rugby player, mate. You shouldn't be being penalised 5 times during a game and not having any punishment for it. You've got to have some consistency in the decisions there. But also, the referee saying, have a word with your team about the discipline, does that necessarily mean go and speak to them right now about it? It could have meant at the next breakdown when there's a gap in play. But there was that thing with the water boys being on the pitch. But is it really down to the referee to make sure that the English water carriers are on the pitch and the Welsh water carriers are on the pitch? Shouldn't it be up to the teams to make sure they've gone off or they don't come on when the game's been resumed? I just think there was a big loss in communication and we got lucky, but I'll take it. It was a great kick and a good finish.
Well, for me, to blow it totally out of the water, there's 2 things. Number one, Farrell said that I got all my team together, and you've given me 15 seconds. Whereas I've got photographic evidence that on the left-hand side of the pitch where the Welsh guy kicked the ball, their backs, there was nobody there. But on the opposite side, all of their backs were lined up.
Yeah,
So
the line's set already. So what are they moaning
half
for?
of the side were ready, half of the side weren't. So you're going to kick it to the side where you're not ready. So that was number one. But the second point about the water boys, I've actually seen a video today of Farrell playing for his club against Edinburgh, where he did exactly the same thing. It's on Twitter. I've seen it all over Facebook today.
Yeah.
Where it was snowing. He sees the opportunity. The water boys are standing next to him. He kicks it into the corner. Chris Ashton, the ball bounces really kindly for him. He dives, picks it up, scores a try. So that's, for me, those are the 2 points, and it blows that out of the water. And then on the second try, which I thought was a knock on, Reece Zammit running forward, grabs the ball. It's kind of behind him. He knocks it forward, but it hits it. Talking about calves, it was a calf strike, and the ball went backwards. And there's millions of rules in rugby, and if you say you know them all, then you're a liar. And I didn't know this rule, and I'm surprised that the ref knew. You can't know all the rules because they change rugby rules every 4 days. It's just ridiculous. And it hit his calf and went backwards. And the rule of the law is if you're running with the ball and you drop the ball and kick it forward, that's not a knock on. You've kicked the ball. So if he's caught the ball and he's lost control of the ball, that was the issue, but it hit his calf and went backwards. So rule of the law is it's a try. I would have been seething if it had been against Wales, and I wouldn't be having this conversation. But in the rule book, it's a try. But I don't know. Even if you take away both the tries, Wales won by 2 points because we won 40 points to 24, so we won by 16. So you take away the 2 tries, which are kind of controversial. You take away the conversions, they still won, and they didn't play that well. They played better, but they still didn't play, 60, 70% of what they got capable of playing. So Italy game, you can't look past Italy. But I'm looking past Italy to the French game in 3 weeks' time, which will be for I think it's our 5th Grand Slam since the year 2000. And nobody else has won more than 2. I think Ireland and England have won 2. So it's a tremendous time to be, anyone in Wales really, because everybody's a rugby fan. Was it just generally all sports in your area, or was there, like in Wales, if you were male, it was rugby. If you were female, it was hockey and netball. But it was rugby. You couldn't play anything else. It was rugby. PE lessons was rugby. And then obviously cricket in the summer, but you weren't allowed to do anything else. I
did hockey. Does that make me female?
Yes.
Cheers, bud.
That's all right. What was it with you, Connor?
I went to a very multicultural school in West London, and I played basketball, table tennis, regular tennis. I played rugby, football, rounders, boxing at the weekends and in my evenings and stuff. I did quite a lot of sports, and there was a lot of sports available to me as well. And I was very sporty when I was younger. Always got involved with most of the teams. So I was on the basketball team. I came second in my a couple of times in the table tennis tournaments and stuff like that. I've always been very good at things, but never kind of elite. Just always very good.
There was a lot of access to sport. My school was next to my leisure centre, which was 100 meters from my house. So I played a lot of squash, badminton, say table tennis, football. But in school, in your PE lessons in the winter, it was rugby. You played football, but not in school. It was after school or for your town, Carmarthen town. But in school, I suppose it didn't help that my head teacher was a Welsh referee and my PE teacher was a British line rugby player, Roy, who's coming on in a couple of weeks. So obviously that didn't help. Supportive in your other sports when you excel. So cricket in the summer, you were allowed to go off and have your county training and things like that. But when it came to, representing your school, rugby was the be all and end all. And then you go home and, you've got your mother and your auntie and, all this week now it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're 7 years old or whether you're 77 years old. It's the number one subject in Wales will be rugby. In Wales, it'll be rugby, then COVID. It's just a way of life, you know, and you'll see the build up in the next couple of weeks. It's good in one way, but it puts a lot of pressure on the Welsh rugby team. You know, you look at all the different. I suppose it's the same in England with football. When you're coming up to a World Cup, you know, you look at all the newspapers and it's, you know, England are going to win the World Cup. England are going to get to the semis. You know, they've got a crap team this time, but they're still going to get to the semis and they got a chance of winning. It's the same down in Wales with the rugby. You know, they get built up even on years where, you know, they haven't been that good. I suppose 80s, 90s was a bit of a barren spell. But Wales Online now, or Wales, you know, the South Wales Echo and the different journals down there, it's so much pressure, which isn't a good thing, you know, compared to, you know, it's not the same with the rugby up here. You don't see it's football, you know, the rugby. I suppose that's why they can play with a bit of freedom, and you know, England have done pretty well in the last 20 years. Is they haven't got that pressure.
Yeah, definitely. I think in North Wales, especially, you have a bit more of a rugby football divide. I don't know if that's to do with the Northwest clubs being local and that. And we don't have a region up north either, do we, for the rugby, because they're all south based. I don't see why we couldn't have a North Wales rugby region at some point. We've got RGC being a great godsend for developing talent up here. It's the whole reason the club was started, to be honest, as like a development region for North Wales. Because you would get players coming in and out, but they're having to sort of move down to the regions because it's Gower for the Ospreys, isn't it? Because they're out Swansea way, or is it Neath and Gower?
Ospreys is Neath and Swansea.
Neath and Swansea, that's it.
With the Scarlets, which is Netty, but I think you've got a lot more football up North Wales. You know, as I was saying to you a couple of weeks ago, you know, the Connacht, it's not called the Connacht League of Wales now, it's the Welsh League. Nearly all the teams are from North Wales. You've got Carmarthen Town, where I'm from. You've got Halford West, who my mate Wayne is the manager of, and you've got Barry, which is kind of, you know, Gavin and Stacey country, but everything else is North Wales. You know, so you've got a lot. You know, you've got probably 7, 8, 9 clubs up in the North Wales area, whereas you've only got 3 or 4. I think Llanelli were another one who've kind of go up and down. So
half of the teams playing in the South League aren't even based in the South of Wales, to be honest with it, because it goes into 2 tiers in the second division, doesn't it, North? Yeah. So they're not even South Wales teams. It's quite funny, to be fair.
So it's mainly football. So there's a lot of competition up there. There's not much rugby. All the rugby's always been, you know, Swansea, Neath, Pontypridd, this, you know, that more Newport kind of area, down to Swansea, Cardiff. It's all around that area. So that's why there's, you know, there wouldn't have been a lot of rugby up your area, but and rugby league from North Wales. You know, you've got all your Salfords, your Warringtons, your Widners, all around the Manchester, Liverpool, just above that. You know, just I suppose just north of Manchester. All your teams are up there, and a lot of North Walians would. I remember back. As rugby was turning professional in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of players from that area went to rugby league. Obviously, number one, because they were getting paid for it, but number two, it was a closer area to go than to come and play rugby union down south.
Yeah, it's the same in Yorkshire as well. Like, I was in Leeds for 5 years at uni. Leeds around as a massive rugby union's not really a factor, and apart from in Newcastle, because they got the Falcons, rugby union doesn't really resonate up north of England, which is
the new Newcastle Falcons rugby union.
Yeah,
I'm saying new. It's probably 20 odd years old.
But I was thinking, I think it came in when I started watching the game. It was in its infancy then, so that's trying to break into another market, isn't it?
To Wilkinson, they brought in Johnny Wilkinson.
I think they had Toby Flood there for a while as well. A few good players.
Yeah, but they brought them in to raise the profile in that area, because everything, even you know, even with England, I think Exeter, they're relatively new. 10, 15, 20 years old. When I say new, I know that like Swansea and Llanelli are like 100 years old. So 10, 15, 20 years is new, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. But we'll talk more about rugby in the next 2 weeks. We've got a lot of rugby guests on in the next few weeks, and we can talk in depth to people who know exactly what they're talking about. So great to have you on, Conor. And I say listen to his show on a Monday night at 6 p.m. unless it's Watershed, and then it'll be a bit later.
And you're on YouTube, and it's just Fight and Talk 2 on YouTube, is it, mate?
Yeah, Fight and Talk 2. It's a pretty cool logo. It's like an MMA glove, and then it's cage behind it, set of headphones, and it's all yellow as well. It's so much of MMA and fighting, as you can see behind you with Tony Ferguson, I believe that is. It's all kind of it's all black, red, and white predominantly, and blue. That's kind of like the MMA colors almost. So I went with yellow because no one does yellow. No one does yellow in MMA. So here I am.
In the yellow corner.
That's it. That is
like
it. But no, thank you very much for having me on the show. And I just like talking about fighting, as you can see. So whenever you need to talk about MMA, I'm all there.
Brilliant. Okay, great, lads. We've been listening to Randolph Martin's Sports Talk on Sportanarium. Up next, we've got AD, and he's doing his couple of hours of music. So stay tuned and have a listen to AD on Sportanarium. See you all next week, Friday, 5 p.m.